OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger Eoin and Owen Sheehan with you all the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And it is the day of a big World Cup qualifier. How are you feeling, Owen? You feeling the love?
Yeah, I actually am. You wake up this morning, I think this is the first morning of the year where 6:30 is properly bright. I know the clock's going to change this week. I mean, there's a bullish Ireland captain out in the media the day before a big World Cup qualifier. There is the weird mental thing of time just passing and more confidence seeping into your mindset for no reason whatsoever. So yes, I would say I am feeling the love this morning and feeling slightly upbeat about what the future prospects of the Ireland team might actually involve.
It's the World Cup. Like, it hasn't really felt like the build-up to a World Cup game, I would have to say, because there's been this black pall of despair and fear over the Ireland fans because we basically haven't scored a goal in a million years, and we don't really have anybody to hang our hat on that's doing it at the very top level in English or world football at the moment. Like in most previous campaigns, there was always somebody you could go, oh, that person is playing unbelievably well. They might be the one person who'll be that magic moment or that bit of quality in the team. And yet, I don't know, I feel like the same as you. It's our opportunity to have a little bit of optimism.
Yeah, but without question, I think that some of the photographs even of just seeing Matt Doherty and Seamus Coleman training together yesterday can't not fill you with hope. Like, these two guys are really, really good players playing at very high level in the Premier League. And I think international football is a strange thing where just one or two players of a significant quality can change the team. And I think it just makes it more important when one of those players in particular always puts in an unbelievable shift for Ireland, is a phenomenal captain. And I don't know, if you want to be really negative about the Ireland camp, what you could say potentially is that the poor run of results and the lack of scoring goals could lead to a further dent in the confidence and maybe a lack of effort if you wanted to actually get to that end point. But when Seamus Coleman's in there, you never feel that way. You never feel as if the captain of the team is going to let that malaise ever set into this team, that at least Ireland are probably not going to come away from this game tonight feeling like that they didn't put in 100% or feeling like they didn't give a really good account of themselves. And when you look at the quality that Ireland have in certain places, I know that Serbia have a better team, like that is a fact. There's just something intangible about this Ireland team where you're like, you have to give them a bit of a chance tonight. And tonight is so important because if they lose this game, it's going to be a massive uphill battle. I know that Luxembourg and Azerbaijan, in fairness, may form some sort of banana skin a la Georgia down the line for maybe Serbia to trip up themselves. But really, it's Ireland versus Serbia. And if Serbia get 3 points in one of the games, you can pretty much say that they've got a massive upper hand in getting that second spot.
Okay, well, one of the questions that hasn't come up this week, and it's interesting you bring up Coleman and Doherty, and there's great pictures of the back, I think, of the Indo, which we'll show when we're doing the papers a little bit later on, of them having the crack, which is kind of slightly different from the studious picture of the management team on the sideline, obviously trying to decide what they're going to do. And that's been the big question about who's going to be in the back four. The question has exclusively been about whether or not we're going to have a back four. And even yesterday, when you guys were debating, I don't think anybody suggested that there's a possibility we could go three at the back, which if you cast your mind back to the very start of the era, the whole point was, how do we get our two best players who are in best form into the team at the moment? And could we play three at the back? Could Coleman be one of those three at the back? Could Doherty be a right wing back? Is there any possibility that there's a rabbit in the hat pulled tonight, and that actually he does find a way to put Duffy in the team, and he finds a way to have Coleman right beside him to try and get the confidence back for Duffy, and he then also has in his best position at right wing back Matt Doherty?
It hasn't been spoken about as much as previous times, and it did seem like the automatic way to assemble your chips essentially at the start of the Mick McCarthy era in particular, the second era that is. Like the reasons behind not doing it obviously is the fact that it's more to do with Stephen Kenny. Like, I think Mick McCarthy, there was almost a lack of a solid formation attached to Mick McCarthy where you thought to yourself, well, he couldn't adapt to what Coleman and Doherty might bring. Whereas with Stephen Kenny, he's coming to the Ireland camp with his very firm idea of how football should be played, of how a formation should look, and the Ireland players are fitting into that. So I think that's probably why people are more inclined to believe that if Matt Doherty plays tonight, he's going to play maybe as a right winger, essentially, as a forward, and Stephen Kenny will stick with his 4-3-3.
And look, I can totally understand why the seasoned watchers, all the League of Ireland watchers who've watched the career of Stephen Kenny have said that there's no way he's going to go 3 at the back. But it was interesting. Vinnie Perth did say to us, I think, ages ago, that there's no doubt that he would have thought of this. There's no doubt that we would have seen it at some point in one of those games if everybody had been fit and available and ready to go. So, look, the team selection, I think, is going to be very important. But let's talk about the Ireland captain. Pardon me. Wow, that's a lovely start for everybody out there. I bring you all this morning here on OTB AM. A reminder, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Let's talk about Seamus Coleman, because there was just a little bit of bite in Seamus Coleman's press conference yesterday. There was one specific thing that was brought up, and I just want to have a listen, have a look at this.
Just on you doing the press conferences, Seamus, and then maybe you don't play, maybe you do. How difficult is that for you personally? I mean, you're putting yourself up forward, and
Absolutely not one bit difficult whatsoever. There's no ego with me whatsoever. I read something about me being disappointed at being asked or getting told to go to a press conference. The manager left me out of his first game. Had the decency to call me to his room and explain the situation, which I was fine with because Matt was playing very well at the time. There's absolutely no ego involved in me, and there never has been. And then to read that I was disappointed to be asked to go to a press conference when the manager had the decency to say, you don't have to do the press conference if you don't want. I know, it might be disappointing because you're not playing, so if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. If you want to do it, it's fine. My duty as captain, my duty for the rest of the players is to be positive around the place, whether I play or I don't play. And I went to that press conference with absolutely no issues whatsoever. So it was actually very disappointing to read something like that about myself when I've got a character in the game that, plenty of managers would back, and I think if any other of my managers read that, I'd say they'd be like, that's a bit strange, or that's a bit surprising. So that was disappointing to read, I have to say.
Right, that's very interesting from Seamus Coleman, because the actual headline in the Star newspaper was, to humiliate, we can stick this up, to humiliate any player, never mind the skipper, in this way is truly unbelievable. And it was unbelievable because he wasn't humiliated, as we've just heard there from the horse's mouth. And that piece kind of went on to talk about how, there was loads of different issues with Kenny at that point, and it was kind of a sign that he was really struggling at that point in his reign. Don't forget Seamus Coleman's demotion from the side in September for the opening game against Bulgaria, when he was deemed good enough to attend the pre-match press conference, even when he knew he was not starting the following evening. Imagine the response that Robbie Keane, Roy Keane, Andy Townsend or Mick McCarthy would have given to any of their bosses had they been requested to attend a press conference, having been told they were not playing. I mean, I would expect that any of those men would have done their duty as captain and gone out and faced the media, because that's part of the role of captain. But I guess maybe Paul Lennon knows differently about how they would have responded. Coleman, ever the professional, and at pains not to upset the camp or deviate from his commitment to his country, fulfilled a commitment he should never have been asked to go to humiliate any player. Never mind the senior international side skipper and a player who is the most respected in the dressing room in this way, is truly unbelievable. Unbelievable, Jeff. Seamus Coleman came back pretty strong on that. Now, in fairness, this wasn't the first time we'd heard that this wasn't, that there was that it wasn't unbelievable, because I think the next day they had to publish something on the back of the papers. So we can stick the next one up here. This was David Snade tweeted this out. I just can't read the top of that one there. Maybe you can read the top of that. Oh, here, I've got it now. Having been labelled a peddler of misinformation by one experienced colleague and described as a sycophant by another in England for reporting the reasons behind Duff leaving the FAI and the senior players, including Seamus Coleman, support Stephen Kenny. This is interesting. Meanwhile, informed sources within the FAI have denied the claim in yesterday's Irish Daily Star that Seamus Coleman was asked by Kenny to carry out the pre-match press conference prior to the Nations League game with Bulgaria and Sofia last September. Instead, they say that Coleman insisted on performing the media duties, even though Kenny suggested that he could request another senior player to do so. Coleman already knew he would not start the game when he sat beside the manager in the Levski Stadium on the eve of the match. So what happened here was Coleman was told he was dropped, was offered the opportunity not to do the press conference, and like a man, like a captain, like a leader, he showed up and went, I'm going to do this because that's my gig. That's the gig when it comes to captaining your team, as opposed to, being humiliated or any of that kind of stuff. And it is interesting that there's this kind of background noise around management of Stephen Kenny, the pressure is ratcheted up on him, when it doesn't seem to be there from the players. It seems that stuff like this actually, maybe in a roundabout way, brings the players and management even closer together, because we all realise that Stephen Kenny is up against it.
Yeah, like I don't think I kind of really copped this story too much at the time. It rang a bell, and I remember the logic doing the rounds all right, that maybe Seamus Coleman was doing press duties, therefore he was going to start. That's generally the logic. That's the only thing I really remember about this. So this is kind of like a good bit of a refresher for me as well. The thing that does stick out to me is that I might have been inclined to think that if you're not getting picked for a team, you might be less inclined to go out and do media, but not Seamus Coleman. He's not that type of guy whatsoever. He has been and he is an unbelievable captain for this team. And I know that's not kind of what it is. Like, we have James McCullough in the comments saying Seamus is a class act as captain and leads with distinction. I can't wait for him to lead us to the World Cup when we win this group. I think that's probably hammered home a little bit by this. It's such a strange little thing to have come up with, that Coleman would be unhappy with that, because like that conversation as well happens between Coleman and Stephen Kenny. Like, who is then passing that on? You know, who it insinuates almost that Seamus Coleman was the one that was passing on his lack of happiness. It almost insinuates that he was the one leaking this information at the time, if you were looking at that report, because Stephen Kenny, there would be no interest in him leaking that. So I guess it was a small bit damaging for Seamus Coleman, to say the least, that this report actually did come out.
Yeah, interestingly enough, obviously, David Myler, who would have been in that dressing room, was on with us the following Saturday and was very quick to nail the fact, again, that had been corrected the following day, that Coleman obviously wasn't saying this, and that wasn't true at all. Have a listen to what David Myler had to say at the time.
Even as I read the article, I was thinking, like, what a load of nonsense this is. If you know Seamus, if you've ever spoken to Seamus, if you've ever watched Seamus in an interview, like, you'll know the type of character he is, you know. Obviously, Stephen had had a chat with Seamus, told him he wasn't playing. Seamus is captain, which is, you know, obviously he's meant to do the press conferences the night before a game. And Seamus said, yeah, I'll do it. That's he's the captain of Ireland. He's, you know, stepping forward. Of course, he'll be annoyed he's not playing, but it wouldn't have been no ego or none of that kind of stuff. It's, you know, I had something similar with Martin. I remember before Martin came to me, it was a bit after, you know, the incident with the leak WhatsApp with Stephen Ward. Martin had brought me, I think it was after the Wales game. I think we played Poland. And Martin brought me to the press conference to address an argument that me and Martin had in training after the Wales game. But I was doing the press conference thinking to myself, well, I'll be playing. And then I did the press conference, and then, you know, later on Martin named the team and I wasn't playing, and I was like, oh my God, you know. But I wasn't aggrieved by it. I wasn't humiliated by it. I thought, oh, I'll be playing. No, I did come on and play in the end, but at the same time I thought I was going to be starting because I did the press conference. Usually when you do the press conference, it's usually, inverted commas, the captain goes and does it. So I thought, oh, I'll be playing, I'll be captain. Lo and behold, I wasn't.
Yeah, so it's interesting that, first off, Myler's experience is exactly what Coleman says it is. Like, Coleman is who he looks like to us, who he appears to be, who his character is, who his appearances on the field would be. And then I just, looking through the paper today, obviously, it's in the Mirror. I think it's been reported on OTBSports.com, and it's reported elsewhere, those comments about the press conference. I'm just flicking through. Now, I'm obviously working from home today, so I'm working off some photographs of the stories. I can't see the bit in the Star today where they're reporting about the comments that Seamus Coleman made about the press conference. I just can't see it. I'm flicking through the paper today, and I've got a bunch of different other, like, they're talking about him in captaincy, and they're talking about him in Serbia, and they're talking about you know, form of players, goalkeeping, last chance saloon, captaining through COVID, how he's determined to make up for lost time. I don't see him angrily lashing out at one of their columnists who said he was humiliated. What do you think?
Yeah, it really is. Like this is, I guess, fascinating the way these things work. I think sometimes maybe as well, these cycles of international football are obviously so far apart that a player can stew on something like this for quite some time. Like obviously, it was interesting that it was a good question. I think it was Dion Fanning maybe who asked the question. It was a really good question for Seamus Coleman yesterday. But at the same time, there's probably like a little bit of something in the back of Coleman's mind as well, going to that press conference yesterday, being like, remember that thing that was written about? Like, players don't forget too easily, but at least in club football, there's a score settled pretty quickly and things blow over. Not in international football. These things turn into sagas pretty quickly.
The laugh at the immediate start of the question was like, okay, I'm glad you asked me this. This is coming up. Great, because I'm ready for it. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Give us your thoughts about the game tonight. Should we start with 352 maybe? 087 180 180 is the number, of course. You can get us in the YouTube comments as well. Phil, good morning to you. How are you?
How are you doing, Ger? How are you getting on? Owen?
A bullish Seamus Coleman. Are you bullish in any way?
Yeah, I want to see what the starting 11 is, and then we'll have more of an idea of what kind of approach Stephen Kenny's going with. But Coleman's going to start. We know that. And yeah, I was glad to see he got to address those scurrilous rumours from earlier in Stephen Kenny's reign. And if Owen was doing power rankings of top lads in football, there wouldn't be anyone ahead of Seamus Coleman. So yeah, just bizarre when you see Seamus Coleman being put in that kind of situation. But on the pitch, he's going to come back into the team. The general feeling is both Coleman and Doherty, and you would imagine he's going to go with a 4-2-3-1. So that would suggest Doherty then starts on the right-hand side of midfield.
And that's kind of right wing, but actually right wing back when we're out of possession.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's something Doherty has not done that well with Spurs this season, and it just goes back to the difference in playing for Wolves and Tottenham, and also the difference in playing as an orthodox right back and a right wing back. Completely different positions, more emphasis on him at Spurs to defend, and the strongest part of his game is going forward. So it's I actually think we could see a really good performance from Doherty. That little bit of pressure would be taken off him if the defensive job isn't there. Like, obviously he's got to cover Seamus Coleman, but you know he's going to be told when you get on the ball, the first thing you got to do is attack. Don't worry about defending.
I know we're missing loads of players, right? I know that the injury list is very long, but in most positions, with I think probably the exception at centre back, the step down from the player who's missing to the player who's coming in isn't vast. It's not like we're replacing Robbie Keane with somebody who has never scored an international goal. We've got a bunch of players who are fairly similar in standard, and some of them are in form. You'd love to see a few players in a bit better form, but it's not like any of the players who we're missing are in absolutely incredible form, lighting up their division or their league or standout candidate player of the year for their club or for their position in the league that they're playing. Like when you see the teams that we've been naming yesterday in particular, it's like it's not a million miles away from what the first team would be.
No, and look, the first team that he picked, the game in Bulgaria, which obviously he went for Doherty ahead of Coleman, but he's going to be without 6 of that starting 11. And I think the position, the biggest loss is the goalkeeper. Whether it was going to be Randolph or Gallagher. Obviously, Randolph has all the experience. He's never really let Ireland down since he came off the bench in that game against Germany. And if he wasn't available, then Gallagher has obviously got great experience playing for Liverpool this season and has shown his temperament at the highest level now. And then Mark Travers comes in. Travers hasn't really kicked on from when he broke into the Bournemouth team. We kind of felt that going to the Championship for Bournemouth would be good news for Mark Travers, but unfortunately he's sitting on the bench again behind Asmir Begovic. He had the loan spell at Swindon. That would be my main concern, but then again there's no crowd there, so it takes a little bit of the pressure off, and this isn't a bad time to be blooding players in where there isn't going to be a hostile atmosphere. Saying that, the last time we actually played Serbia in Belgrade, there was only 7,000 at the game in that massive stadium, because Serbians at the time were thinking this team of ours isn't that great, so they didn't really turn out to support. It was also a horrible night. It rained all day in Belgrade that day, but obviously no fans are there. It's not going to be hostile tonight. yeah, like look at some of the players that are missing. John Egan is a loss as well in midfield. Conor Howran. A lot of people would say Howran hasn't really delivered at international level for a guy that has such ability that maybe he's a bit passive in games. So who does he throw in there today? If he has Malumbi and Josh Cullen and Jason Knight, you know, that is not as you say a big drop off. I have a feeling he's going to go with Jeff Hendrick just in terms of experience, though.
Yeah, I think that's the point Nathan was making, and that sounds quite likely. And look, you know, we know what we're going to get from Hendrick over the course of the 90 minutes. There'll be some good moments. There'll be some moments where you're kind of wondering maybe he could be a bit more aggressive here and stamp his authority on the game a bit more. Who knows? Maybe that's the chance. Give me a prediction, Phil.
I would be lying if I said I was positive about this game. I can't see us winning the game, and honestly, if you offered me a draw, I would be snapping the hands off you right now. But I would be leaning towards Serbia to win by a goal.
Okay, all right. So Serbia in a close game, and more heartbreak for the Republic of Ireland and Stephen Kenny and Seamus Coleman. What else is going on in the world today, Phil?
Well, obviously that game kicks off at 7:45. At the same time, then Portugal, the group favourites, host Azerbaijan. Wales are also in qualifying action as well. They have a tough one. Like, we think we've a tough game against Serbia. They're away to Belgium, and that's in Group B. That's at 7:45 as well. And no Aaron Ramsey, no Ryan Giggs as well. Obviously, he's stepped aside from international football for the moment after he was arrested on an allegation of assault. A charge which he denies. So his assistant Robert Page will be in charge. Manchester City and Chelsea are both in quarter-final action in the UEFA Women's Champions League later on. City are away to Barcelona. That one actually gets underway at 11:30 this morning in the first leg. And then Chelsea host last year's beaten finalist Wolfsburg. That one gets underway at 4 o'clock. The Lions tour of South Africa is to go ahead as planned from the 3rd of July. The tour committee last night confirmed, though, they'd ruled out a potential home series of games in the UK in favour of travelling to South Africa as originally scheduled. Not yet known if those games will be played without fans or not. And Bundy Aki will miss Connacht's Challenge Cup last 16 tie with Leicester next week. He's been given a 4-game ban, so if they were to win that game and get to the quarter-final, he'd be ruled out of that one as well. It's for the red card that he received for the dangerous tackle against England in the Six Nations win last Saturday. And there's golf on this afternoon. Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry both in action on day one of the WGC Dell Match Play Championship in Texas. McIlroy plays Ian Poulter at 1:45 Irish time, and then Lowry faces Ryan Palmer just after 2 o'clock.
Phil, one last question. We were talking a little bit about the possibility of us going to 3 at the back. It hasn't been discussed, so presumably there's been no hint of it, no leak of it, no discussion about it. Is there no reason, no possibility on earth that there's a rabbit pulled from Stephen Kenny's hat?
I would love it. I would love if the team came out and we were all scratching our head going, looks like he's playing 3 at the back, because obviously it then gives you a chance maybe not having to play that target man up front. You could maybe go with a Robinson and Connolly as a front two, a 5-3-2, and then if I was asked to pick 3 midfielders, I'd probably go Cullen, Malumbi and Jason Knight, and then obviously you've got Doherty and Stevens as your wing backs, and I would go Coleman, O'Shea and Clark as my 3 centre halves.
I was thinking that the likelihood is that he might do it to try and get Shane Duffy back in the team and give him the confidence and the security blanket of having 2 experienced campaigners in Clark and Coleman beside him. But when you name that team, look at the pace and the excitement and the aggression in midfield and up front, and the hard running.
Also as well, it negates what they might do. There is a general feeling that they might go 3 at the back. So it would mirror their formation, and that mightn't be a bad thing either. But yeah, I'd be very surprised if he tried it, given the short turnaround. Like, they only arrived in camp on Sunday, unless he's been holding these Zoom calls and say, right, we're going 3 at the back, keep it under your hats, and we're going to pull a fast one on the Serbians, and we're going to show everyone that we can play 3 at the back, and Ireland win. And what a masterstroke from Stephen Kenny. Well,
look, stranger things have happened, rarely enough in international football, but sometimes they do. Phil, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Cheers. More from Phil Egan across the day, of course, on otbsports.com and on the OTB Sports app. And a reminder, of course, Ireland against Serbia live tonight from 7:45 kickoff with Nathan and Stewie Byrne. Live commentary on Off the Ball on News Talk. Coming up in just a moment, we're going to speak with Derry boss Rory Gallagher. Sports pages coming your way at 8:10. Owen's Bluffer's Guide to Serbia at 8:20. Matt Holland, Republic of Ireland International at 8:30. Ali Donnelly's going to talk to us about the situation with regards to the Women's Six Nations. We've got the Type 5 coming with Neil Treacy at 9:05. And then at 9:30, it's a feature-length interview from the Paddy Power special yesterday with Danny Murphy talking about his life and times. Really interesting stuff in that coming your way at 9:30 this morning. You can tweet us using the hashtag OTB AM. And a reminder, OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Now, it is 7:56 this morning. As I said, we'd love to hear from you, particularly if you're a parent who is looking forward to the ability of your kids to go back and play some GAA, or if you're a club GAA player, wondering about when you're going to get the opportunity to go back and train 15 aside. And indeed, if you're in the north, because it looks like you're going to get the opportunity to go out and play some ball ahead of everybody else. I'm delighted to say we've got Rory Gallagher with us this morning. Rory, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How's it going?
This is a very unusual situation where you're going to be training a team that has the right to go back training. And will you actually be allowed to go and train them yourself, or what is the scenario?
I haven't asked that question, so I haven't. But yes, my work actually takes me into the north regularly, so it does. So you'd hope that would be able to cross that boundary, But definitely on the road, there's a lot of Garda presence over this last while. But look, we're just probably all feel that we're close, definitely in the north, with everywhere to getting back to doing some form of training.
Yeah. We really wanted to talk to you, Rory, because you've got the experience on either side of what looks like a jurisdiction where the vaccinations are happening at gangbusters pace, and then on this side of the border where, we did 300 in a day, the magic number that everybody keeps talking about a couple of weeks back. So what's that been like over the last while?
Yeah, obviously it's been a huge topic of conversation, particularly on border areas. And in some ways, some people in the north can be oblivious to a lot of what goes on down south, and vice versa, but it's really brought it to a head. Like, I know a number of weeks ago, I called down by home to believe to me parents, and my mother is only 63. She had got it some time ago, which is quite frightening considering there's people, in this area at that stage at 85 and 90 who hadn't got it. But the north they're starting to slag me, even though despite being originally from the north, these boys are holding us back, So look, it's unfortunate, but the north they have an attitude that they want to plough on, and I definitely see through my work over the last number of weeks the traffic and footfall in the north been an awful lot busier than it was some time ago.
And as that happens, are people generally getting a little bit happier and a little bit more confident about life?
They appear to be, they definitely appear to be. They're putting more concrete plans into, I know, the hotel industry and the hospitality industry, things like that. They're making plans to get open, and that's exciting people. They were a wee bit slower getting schools back. They were very cautious with that, so they are not even sure if all secondary school pupils are back yet in the north. But no, you definitely see more contentment, more people out and about in shops, standing around, towns and villages, just having chats. And not that COVID's over, but they're starting to get the sense that it is,
Yeah, I think that sounds like some kind of promised land for us here.
Yeah. But definitely, in our town here, Killybegs, which is generally very, very vibrant, during the week, it's reasonably busy because the fishing industry is deemed essential. But at the weekend, when you're driving through it or going anywhere for messages, it's like a ghost town, and it's quite scary and comparable to the north. Even though the north's not at full pelt, it's still very different.
Can I just ask you about the football element of things, Rory? What has your role been, I guess, as an intercounty manager over the last few weeks, and how does that now change given you're managing a team who will get that leg up and get that head start on the rest of the country?
Well, I'm not certain we'll get a head start. I suppose every county management team and players that we're talking to are still probably living in the hope that inter-county teams will get back to training maybe at the start of April. I think that is the hope, but at the minute as it stands, there's no clarity in that. So we take it that we get back in pods of 15, and we've just been speaking to the different coaches and to the players about how we will go back like that come the start or the 12th of April, if that is the case. But it's just managing it. If that is the case, you have to do in two separate pods of 15. It's still going to be very, very different. I know we had a wee bit used to it in club situations last year, but it will be different. But we're very much living in the hope that inter-county teams may get the green light at the start of April.
So it's obviously not full training, and is it a situation where you might have two separate locations? Is that the lengths you'd have to go to ensure that the restrictions are actually met?
No, we don't. We plan to use Owen Begg, our centre of excellence, and just bring them in different time slots. That's the way we want to do it, I suppose if we get back, none of us will be any rush away. We'll be that glad to be there, and we want to be hands-on and not have to go to two separate locations. We're very fortunate that Owen Begg has a fair size of facility. It's very, very well kit out, and we were used to it a wee bit last year in several pitches, so it won't be difficult to keep them apart. Probably, we're talking about ourselves, senior footballers. You would hope that obviously the hurlers will get back. I'm not sure on ladies under 20, so that will be a management process for the county board. But, at this stage, I'm not sure what their plans are for all that.
Is there a sense within the playing group at the moment that they're just absolutely itching to get back at this point, that they feel maybe that they could have been back even sooner than now?
They are. They're absolutely itching to get back. To be honest, the younger players don't talk about it that much, so they don't. They just get on with it. We have a very young, youthful squad. They just get on with it. It's while we are fed up with it, I think their approach has been very, very mature about it. I think they're using every minute of the time. I think I told you guys we've got a new coach in, a strength and conditioning coach that we're really, really pleased with. He's an opportunity to bed in and really get to know them. Obviously not the contact time, but to be able to really work on what they need. So we try to channel it in a positive way for them.
What has been the situation outside of elite footballers north of the border over the last little while? Because there's, I guess, been a lot of conversation, as you're well aware, over the last little while about getting kids back playing and allowing them to get back to, meeting their friends and exercising, I guess, in a safe manner. Has that been allowed? Has there been a similar conversation when it comes to those in Northern Ireland?
Oh, there has, definitely, so it is. And I definitely see in the parks there, as I'm driving past, and grass areas, there's a lot of kids out kicking about, and many soccer matches and many rugby matches, many GAA matches going on everywhere. So I do see that, and I think there's only so much you can hold children. I know my own age group and that, and whether it's out in a park, in a green field in a state, you can't stop them kicking around. And I think there's been a relative amount of common sense applied to that, and there's mass numbers,
Rory, it's obviously been an unbelievably weird time over the last 18 months or so. From a management perspective, what have you learned about interacting with people and giving them responsibility, and how you micromanage people or don't, and how you let people off to make their own mistakes? What has that whole experience been like from just your own leadership skills?
Yeah, no, it's definitely been different. So it has, lads. I think some time ago we spoke back, and there's been huge benefits out of it. I wouldn't go as far to say everything can be done remotely now, but we discovered, the amount of clubs, obviously they've been out of use, have brilliant facilities, particularly in the north, with regards to gym equipment. An awful lot of the lads purchased their own and got set up. So that's a big benefit that Peter Hughes, running in his coach, he's able to see what the lads have, apply it to what they need, where they can commit less time to travelling. Derry's different as well, but not a big county. Very few of them have big travelling, but we see the benefits of them doing it in smaller groups of 3s or 4s, just at people's houses now, at local club gyms, where that doesn't need the same level of contact time. It has been a different form of leadership and coaching, because you just don't see them. So you're trying to communicate with them. Obviously we got back for a period of 6 or 7 weeks, and that was really, really enjoyable. And we had a couple of we had a couple of National League games. We'd only one Challenger game, but you've got to be able to now speak to them, I suppose, in smaller groups. We're doing a few smaller group Zoom sessions, more specific to what they're going to need tactically going forward. But it's challenging. It's not how I'd like it. I don't think anybody would want to coach or manage or be involved in team sport. One of the big things you would sign up for team sport is the fun and the crack and the enjoyment. And there's been a huge effort with Zooms, and we've all been on them, and one thing or another to stay connected, it's definitely not the same and not as enjoyable. I wouldn't like a life like that going forward.
Well, what sort of... Go on, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to ask, taking that into account then, that it's kind of hammered home the idea, Rory, that it is all about fun and enjoyment. What sort of championship do you want to see this year? Because Kieran Shannon was making a point in the Irish Examiner yesterday morning that the national leagues perhaps may serve as a precursor to the main thing, that it will be more fun for everybody if everybody's thrown into the championship a little bit earlier than they're used to in their season. What's your take on that?
Well, I'd like to see a championship with Derry being Ulster champions. That's the first thing. So anything that involves that, I actually think from our point of view, we're desperate for games. We have a young squad. I think most county players are desperate for games. I wouldn't be in a rush. I'm not certain when club football is going to take place. I know there was a WhatsApp message going around yesterday. I'm not so certain the Irish government will allow that too early. So I wouldn't be rushing a championship by any stretch of the imagination. I think the league is laid out in a regional basis, which is fine. It's as fair as it can be. But I suppose ultimately, I don't think anybody would complain in a championship where every team was guaranteed 3 or 4 games. I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't. I would be more than content if the league was ran as proposed, with regional games, with guaranteed 4 games, and I would ultimately like a knockout championship to give everybody another opportunity. Or sorry, not a knockout, a backdoor opportunity. But thinking ahead, I know there's proposals ahead for the championship going forward, so it is, and I do see the upside of them as well, which is, in all equations, is giving county players more games.
Yeah, and there will obviously be, I guess, changes coming down the line to, I guess, the structure and how it's looked at. Like you mentioned there, I guess players training in their own pods, having to be a little bit innovative when it comes to their conditioning ahead of the season. Do you see that being a permanent culture change in the GAA, where perhaps pre-season times on an inter-county level are just done away with, not completely, but they're shortened considerably, and that the games to training ratio will just have to go up over the next couple of years, because maybe there is this realisation that there is more to GAA than the long trainings from October all the way through to January before you kick a ball? Yeah, I do, lads. I think it's good, definitely, but I think the big thing was... yes, the training, there was a lot of training, but there wasn't enough games. So there wasn't, I think everybody wants more games, and that's club and county, and that's the challenge for us to combine both. I see the natural order of the split season, meaning that county players who at the end of the day are fairly elite in the way they look after themselves, they generally are fitter, better conditioned than the majority of other players. So their downtime still won't be that significant. So the need for a big pre-season will definitely not ever be the same again. And it's actually lessened massively. God forbid I wouldn't like to put players through what we put them through in Donegal in 2011 and 12 again. So I wouldn't, I don't think that's sustainable anymore. It's a very short-term, natural lifespan. So it is. But I think if you don't play a club championship to September, October, your club get any sort of run into October, possibly early November, those players will naturally take 3, 4, 5 weeks off, and then you'll be back into it in January. But again, players have a very hands-on approach now with all the strength and conditioning and physios that are involved in inter-county setup. So the downtime will be managed in the sense that they'll do the recovery, they'll work on rehab, and they'll be back at it. But no, I agree, there won't be the big, hard pre-season slog. You see soccer teams, there'll be 3 or 4 weeks pre-season, but within a week of it, they're playing games, and I see that's the way the GAA is going as well.
It's the right thing to do, isn't it? Like when you look back, Rory, at your own career, and you think from the time you were 19 or 20 to the time you were 30, how many championship games did you actually play, and how ridiculous it was that you would have been playing football all year round to essentially play 10 or 12 games over a 10 or 12 year period. Yeah, God forbid you were playing for Fermanagh from maybe mid-80s to mid-90s, and they only won 2 games, so you played 8 or 9 of those years, or 10 of those years. I think they were in 16 or 17 year period where they trained and only 1 championship game, and the other years that only 2. Thank heavens for the back door, kind of early enough in my career that allowed us opportunities to play more games. But yeah, that's exactly it. You want more games, and I think ultimately more championship games would be good. I really like there's a proposal coming down the road that gives everybody an opportunity to play in their own provincial championship. So it is obviously one team, say in Ulster, is going to head off to Connacht if it doesn't make it, and then into 2 groups of 4. As somebody involved in Ulster and who loves the Ulster Championship, to be guaranteed 3 Ulster Championship games would be really, really exciting every year for every player. So that's the one that you want, and I totally understand that. Well, I've got one last question in terms of the game smarts of the players. Like we've seen little bits and pieces leak out from the books that the Dublin lads have started to write in the aftermath of of their success. And it turned out that those small groups of players where the players' leadership was worked on very early on, they would be kind of leading pre-match and post-match and doing there was guided meditation in one of them as well. But like not quite the tactical plans. Has that been happening everywhere around the country, or is that something that people are looking at and going, that's interesting? You're kind of forcing the players to be decision makers before the match starts, so that when the match is in the melting pot, that actually they are then decision makers as well.
Yeah, I massively see the benefits of it. I don't think Dublin could have done that in 2010 or 2011. So I don't, or to any time up to that. I think it's a natural progression. So it is of a team when they build up other aspects of, of their culture and of the way they go about things. But once you become a well-oiled machine like Dublin do, and you have a level of success, I think that's a natural order, and it's ultimately the way you would like it to be done. And a lot of coaching then goes over to the players. Part of coaching is you can give them the situations that do crop up, and it's how they handle them. And I think that there's no doubt that Dublin in the last 2 or 3 years are massively different than the rampage in Dublin of 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16. They're far more calculated, measured, in control group, and that's both with and without the ball, And I do think that's ultimately where everybody would like to end up with. But in Dublin, we're talking about probably one of the most successful sport teams ever in any sport. So they are, Tom Brady gets eulogised everywhere, and rightly so, big fan. But there's huge gaps between his success. Look at Dublin's continued phenomenal success, and I'm not part of it, but I can only imagine it's a phenomenal place for them to be. It's a phenomenally energising and practically very intellectual place that those group of players and management have got them to,
Yeah, and that's the challenge for everybody. Rory, good stuff. Great to talk to you. Thanks a million.
No bother, lads. Cheers.
Always great to talk to Rory Gallagher there, of course. Killybegs based, managing the Derry footballers at the moment, and I'm sure he'll be, like the rest of Killybegs, cheering on Seamus Coleman tonight. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We'll be going back to the Ireland game a little bit later on in more detail. We'll be talking rugby too, and plenty more besides. We'd love to hear from you this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, 0879 180 180 is the number. Matty Holland's going to join us at 8:30. We'll talk Stephen Kenny's Ireland. Up next, though, we're bringing you Owen's Bluffer's Guide to Serbia.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports Radio. This week, in association with the Irish Cancer Society and supported by Novartis Ireland, we'll have a special takeover of our shows, including Thursdays Off the Ball from 7 p.m, when we'll have our Living Well and Beyond with Cancer panel of Mary Cullen and Noel McGrath. It's that time of the year when the Irish Cancer Society are raising badly needed funds. You can find out more and how to donate at cancer.ie. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Auto Mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Auto Mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Pogba's left Man United before, and Man United have survived. And if he leaves again, Manchester United will survive. Trust me.
Roy Keane wanted to leave.
I never wanted to leave.
He just wanted a bigger contract. He wanted a bigger contract.
Never went for a pay rise in my life.
You had the biggest contract at United, you did.
That's because I performed every week like that. And this idea again, he wants to be loved. That's all I talk about.
It's different though. The players are different now. The players are different now. Come on, give me a hug, Roy. Come on.
Can't social distancing. Social distancing.
I'm just getting I always love players when they're playing football with a smile on their face. And even when, a lot of players now are playing like they got the world on their shoulders. They're playing in the best league. I regret the day, I didn't smile every time I was on the pitch because it's such an unbelievable... What are you looking at there, Roy?
I never like players who smile on the pitch. Too relaxed.
Football isn't fun, Roy.
No. You're there to win, remember.
Yeah, you can win, but you can have a smile on your face.
No, not for me.
Not for me. You're very welcome back to Wednesday's OTB AM. That was the brilliant work of Monaghan native Kaylee Trapp there from yesterday's Paddy Power football special on OTB, reenacting that brilliant scene with Roy Keane, Micah Richards and Kelly Cates. Plenty coming up on the show across the morning, of course. A reminder that Ireland's World Cup qualifier in Belgrade tonight is live on OTB Sports as Nathan Murphy and Stewie Byrne bring you live commentary between 7 and 10. So Kaylee's got the retweet from Micah and Kelly. She's just waiting on Roy Keane to comment on Instagram. So we're nearly there. The Holy Trinity has nearly been delivered. Right, it is time for Owen Sheehan's Bluffer's Guide to Serbia.
Yeah, there's no water cooler in our lives anymore, but there is WhatsApp groups. So it is time to impress all your mates with some half-assed research on Republic of Ireland's opponent, Serbia, tonight. We've got 5 distinct areas we want to break this down into. The first one is Vidic for president. The second one is Wenger 2.0, question mark. The third one is a lopsided defence. The fourth one is Tadic and SMS. And finally, we're going to talk about the new guy, as I've labelled him. You may or may not think he is actually the new guy. Let's start with Vidic for president. This is to do with the Serbian Football Association. Ireland do not have a monopoly over controversy when it comes to football administration. It turns out the Serbian FA have had their own controversy this week because Serbian Football Association President Slavica Kokeza has stepped down, you might have seen, due to links with a criminal group who wanted to stage a coup and kill the president of the country. He is alleged, Kokeza, to have links to the leaders of a partisan Belgrade supporters groups who were arrested in January because of alleged links to the mafia. Now, of course, trying to stage a coup and alleging to kill the president of the country is bad enough, but there is more allegations. There are allegations of kidnapping rival fans, torturing and then murdering them at Partizan's stadium in like a bunker they have there. It is an awfully grim story, to use that word again. Kokeza, though, described the allegations as treacherous accusations devoid of all truth, and he has stepped down basically to take the heat off the association. So he's done the selfless thing this week, Kokeza, and he wants all the positive attention to be poured into the football team. He also called the claim that he had any knowledge of the plot to kill the president as dangerous lies. Now, there's been talk around the Serbian FA for quite some time now. There is maybe a little bit of unhappiness within the country about how football has been run. They've, of course, had a golden generation, which some people feel they haven't got the best out of. Nemanja Matic is one of those people. He's retired from international football, and speaking about the future of Serbian football, he wants Nemanja Vidic to have a role to play. He said, the plan should have a man who takes over the alliance, and I hope that it will be Nemanja Vidic. Is it time for Vidic? We are already late, he says. If we start with a clear plan for the recovery of our football, it will take us 6 or 7 years. We have a future, but fewer and fewer players playing at the top level. Only a few in the best leagues, such as England and Spain. Our domestic league is very bad. Children go abroad early due to lack of conditions and quality and do not reach maturity as players and people. So it's not entirely dissimilar to the way Irish football has spoken about, that maybe the amount of top quality players that they're actually producing isn't satisfying everybody in that country. Now, when we get to the squad in a little while, you'll see that they're in a bit of a better position when it comes to the actual quality that they do have, especially in attack. And that brings us on to point 2 here, which is the manager, who everybody knows, Dragan Stojkovic, a legend of the game, scored both goals for Yugoslavia in that win over Spain in the 1990 World Cup. He's got a Champions League winners medal with Marseille. And as we saw this week on the Serbian FA Twitter account, he has still got it. Now, you will have seen Stojkovic, as we can see his incredible skills there. Stojkovic did an interview with a Serbian publication called Mozart Sport over the last couple of days. And one of the lines from that interview was picked up. He was saying, Ireland have a clue, Ireland can be very uncomfortable, but I can't accept that they can play better than us. So that was one of the lines that obviously got a few legs over here. But I went through that Q&A, put it through Google Translate, and the opening paragraph is quite something. Describing Stojkovic, the journalist said, captivating self-confidence which grabs you by the lapels and speaks right in your eyes. The Serbian national team had numerous selectors, but I don't remember when was the last one who so convincingly, so surely announced the revival and success without even having time to shake hands with the football players and introduce himself by name and surname. I am the selector, Dragan Stojkovic. Now, throughout that piece, they say that one of the biggest aims and one of the biggest challenges for him is to find an identity for Serbian football. Stojkovic says that ID card must be found, and that is connected with the formation of the tactical ideas. So, what is his philosophy going to be? Remember, it is his first game as Serbia manager tonight. what we can tell, unless you've watched a lot of Stojkovic's teams in China and in Japan, what we can tell is from Arsene Wenger, he might have something similar to the Frenchman in the way he actually approaches the game. Stojkovic played under Wenger for Nagoya Grampus 8 back in the day, a couple of seasons under him. And Wenger, speaking in 2011, said, "I would love Stojkovic to be my successor at Arsenal. There are 100 reasons for that. Our ideas are the same and we both strive for perfect football. I knew he was going to have teams playing attacking football with many passes. He has done that, showing he will be a great coach." But unfortunately, life and Unai Emery got in the way of Dragan Stojkovic taking over at Arsenal. So that's what he's going to try and do. Let's, from an Irish perspective, hope that it takes him a little while to actually get up to a Wenger-esque style when it comes to international football. The third thing I want to touch on, this might be clutching at straws a little bit, but I'm going to go for it. Lopsided defence was our third title there, because there was a question from a Serbian journalist in that Q&A as well, which asked him about his thoughts on right-backs, because they said formation is one of the items that have changed frequently in previous years. However, the opinion remained that Serbia, due to a lack of quality defenders, especially right-backs, should play with three in the last line. Now, of course, we could maybe set up a little bit of a trade here where we give them a cohort of right backs and they throw us a couple of attackers. That would be a brilliant trade on our behalf. Their right backs apparently is where they're lacking. Stojkovic is not under pressure, but there's an expectation that he's going to go with three at the back tonight to try and get around that. He says that he's brought in Gajic and Petkovic, two players that he name-checked in the build-up to this game, as right-backs. They play in the Serbian league. They're not of the quality of their centre-backs, so that suggests their dearth of talent there. Again, I accept I'm clutching at straws here a little bit, but if we were to go through that back three that he's going to play tonight, it looks like it's going to be Stefan Mitrovic of Strasbourg, Uros Spajic of Feyenoord, and Nikola Milenkovic of Fiorentina. Now, this is the guy to watch out for. He can play in the back three. He could also play on the right, really, if they do play a back four. He's 23 years old. He's being linked with Manchester United. He's somebody that we're going to hear a lot about in future years for sure. So keep an eye out for him, Milenkovic. But it could be a back three tonight. But if it's going to be a back four, he will do a more than capable job there. Now, second last is Tadic and SMS. Dusan Tadic, of course, and Sergej Milinkovic-Savic of Lazio. And there seems to be this sort of national moment of concern in Serbia, not unlike Coleman and Doherty about these two, about whether or not they can play in the same team. So what did Stojkovic have to say about this? He said, "I heard that story that the two of them can't be together, but I think they can. It just depends on which system, where, how. I think they are different players. Tadic is more creative, an experienced player," he said. Now, Tadic is having an unbelievable season. He's got the most assists in Eredivisie this season with Ajax. He's tied in 5th on the goal-scoring charts as well, with 13 goals to his name. We can get a tweet up here from SofaScore showing just how lethal he's been in recent games, returning attacking returns in each of his last 10 games for Ajax. So he's flying. Whereas with Milinkovic-Savic, he's having a good season with Lazio, but Stojkovic said, "Why didn't I see him play well in the national team the way the public and we all expect? The club is one and the national team is something else." So there is a sense that Milinkovic-Savic plays well for Lazio, but doesn't actually get the best out of himself for Serbia. In terms of his form, he's upped his creativity this year in Serie A. He's got 8 assists, already his highest tally from a single season. And of course, there are plenty of games left to go. And he's also got 6 goals to his name. If you see them both playing tonight, it's going to be a very exciting prospect from Serbia's standpoint. Again, we just need to hope that they actually don't have that cohesion. But in front of them then brings us to the final point, which is the new kid. And that's very much in inverted commas. There's no Kolarov in the squad, there's no Milivojevic in the squad, but it's still a largely experienced squad. I think most of their starting team tonight will be in their late 20s. But Dusan Vlahovic is not in his late 20s. He's only 21 years of age. He has played 4 times for Serbia in the past. He has already scored an international goal, but still, he's early in his international career. And the expectation, or maybe the hope, is that he's going to lead the line tonight, because he scored 12 goals in Serie A this season for Fiorentina. AC Milan and Spurs are sniffing around him. He scored a hat-trick against Benevento recently, which is worth checking out. Not for his first 2 goals, they were fox-in-the-box goals, but for his third goal, which was an absolute screamer. So you could be forgiven if you're a Serbian football fan and getting carried away with this guy, because he's brilliant. They've got brilliant depth up front as well. They've obviously got Alexander Mitrovic and Luka Jovic, who is starting to rediscover his previous Eintracht Frankfurt form by rejoining Frankfurt this season. And he could have a season where he's on the bench, Mitrovic is on the bench, and Marko Grujic of Porto, obviously, is on the bench as well. So a terrifying prospect, maybe, if you look at it that way, an attack. But who knows? Maybe their lack of depth at right back could come back to cost them. One can hope tonight, Ger.
You basically said they're brilliant apart from right back. That Bluffer's guide has suddenly made everybody a little bit terrified about what we face tonight.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, I got this feeling, though, when we looked at Slovakia in a similar way. Like, Slovakia aren't as good as Serbia. But there is always a sense when we look at these players, being like, oh, these guys are all amazing. And, like, I mean, guys playing for Lazio and Fiorentina and all that. There is an exoticism that exists with that, I do believe. That maybe we don't actually give due credence to. Maybe we overrate them a tad. The one other thing actually that I meant to bring up, actually, I just went onto Serbia's Informer website this morning and put it through Google Translate, and they have brought out the dreaded transfer market values. And Serbia's squad, according to them, is worth 336.55 million euros, while on the other hand, the Irish are estimated at slightly less than 103 million European banknotes. Which is Google Translate doing us a solid there, European banknotes, which does suggest that they do have a much better squad than Ireland. But they did choke against Scotland. I think the sense, listening to the Serbian football podcast this week, was that Scotland managed to kill them with just much better midfielders. And do Ireland have the ability to do that? They're not so sure. But would Ireland fancy their chances against Scotland in a one-off match? Maybe they would. And if you take that to its obvious logical conclusion, Ireland do stand a chance tonight.
I don't think we would fancy our chances against Scotland in a one-off match at the moment. I think they've got some players who are genuine quality. And look, heaven forbid that we put any store in the FIFA World Rankings, but FIFA have us at 42 and them at 30. And having listened to your Bluffer's guide, I'm down with FIFA. I think that they've obviously been reading the same material you have.
They must be sorry. They're 30. We are 32. Ireland are 32.
42.
42. Sorry. Right. That makes way more sense. Like, remember the heady days when we were constantly looking at the Republic of Ireland in the top 20. Even though those were the good old days. Like, the thing with Serbia is that they probably feel that they should be higher themselves. That they, as I said there, Nemanja Matic, one of many people saying that they've underachieved. They're obviously. They've come from a very high base of world-class under-20 teams, certainly one in particular, and that maybe hasn't translated into the level of success that they might have wanted. I mean, disappointing absence from the European Championships recently, but they have played at the last couple of World Cups, and they seem to be trending in the right direction in a number of positions in that team. But as Phil was saying earlier on, it could be 2-3 at the backs, essentially. Like, Serbia played it a few times in the past. Ireland maybe a little bit unfamiliar. It would make for a very exciting game if that was the case, even if Stephen Kenny's never going to go there.
I'd be very happy with a 0-0 at this stage, having listened to you there on. So the big question, the burning question I know over team selection, is whether or not Shane Duffy should start for Ireland tonight. Here's what Gary Breen thinks.
But I know that this is part of their development, it's part of their learning curve, and then they can come strong and be the players that we hope they could be. But I was always a bit wary that it could happen within the 12 months. But I'm looking at the situation in terms of the team, and Villy, I wonder if you'll agree here. I've never felt the Ireland team's been picked on club form. It can't be, because we just don't have that strength in depth. It's picked on the best players, and now this is historically the case. You can go back to the likes of our greatest goal scorer, Robbie Keane, not being in the team at Inter Milan, at Tottenham, at Leeds sometimes, and Liverpool. Of course he plays for us. So, and there's a lot of us, not at his level, but who had similar situations, weren't in our Premier League team for whatever reason. So you can come in and produce, whether or not Stephen thinks that these players can do that. Obviously, the big one in terms of that is Shane Duffy. People talk about his form means he can't play. I don't believe that for one moment. I think he can come back into that squad where he has a real presence, a real trust of his teammates. He knows what is expected of him. The big question of whether or not he plays is not about his club form for me. That's, to a certain extent, that's irrelevant. And I like the fact that he's come out of the Celtic team because it gave him a little bit of a rest, a breather, because it seems that with every game, things were going from bad to worse. And I've been in that situation. Sometimes you need to come out of the firing line and just regroup.
Yeah.
But I think the big decision on whether he plays is, what's the tactic going to be? Are they going to pass it out from the back? Now, if that's the case, then you may well be looking at other centre-halves to do that.
Yeah, so that's the view from Gary Breen speaking alongside Vinnie Perth on last night's Off the Ball. You can get the podcast of that if you subscribe to the Football Show podcast stream wherever you get your podcast. And the best place these days, of course, is on the OTB Sports app. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, we'd love to hear from you. Should we be starting 087-9 180 180? Should Shane Duffy start tonight? Let's get your thoughts on that. Now, Matt Holland, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Very well indeed. Thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, we're all a little bit... we started the show very bullish about our chances, and then Owen got into some detail there about just how good the Serbian team are, and all of a sudden we're a bit nervous again. So I don't know how you're feeling.
Blimey, heart or head? That's the question. Heart tells me we might get a result, and a draw would be a good result. Your head tells you different because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And as you say, Serbia in a totally different place, new manager, a squad full of players playing at a high level, a squad full of goals as well, which is something that we don't have. So your heart tells you might get a result. The head tells you perhaps the odds are against us.
That Shane Duffy question has been a question that we keep coming back to, Matt, and the importance of club form when it comes to international duty. And I was looking back at various games you would have played in, and not to go back to the single point where we beat the Netherlands that time, but Jason McAteer plays in that game despite not really playing well at club level at all, but he had the support and the faith of his manager, and obviously that worked out. So there have been numerous occasions in Irish football history where somebody is having a torrid time at club level and they come in and they produce 90 minutes and everybody goes, that's the point of international football.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would play him. I think for his experience and his threat from set pieces as well, which I think might be important for us. Absolutely right. I mean, there's lots of players that have had poor form at club level and then come away, and actually it's a welcome relief to get away from your club where you're having a tough time. Things aren't going particularly well. You're not playing very well. And you come to a fresh environment where you feel wanted, you feel loved. You feel as though you're a real part of it, which is not necessarily been the case at your club. So actually sometimes as a player to get away from that negativity of being around your club and things not going your way, to then go to the international setup where, like for Jason, for instance, Jason always had the backing of the manager. Mick always put his arm around him and he made Jason feel loved. And I think, Shane feels the same when he comes away with our boys. And, even listening to Seamus Coleman yesterday talking about him and how much the players respect him. And I personally think he should play. I mean, I've been an advocate of playing three at the back and it'd be interesting to see whether we do that tonight or not. I think the likelihood is we won't, but I think he certainly gets in a back three, no problem.
That's interesting, Matt. That's really interesting that you think it's three at the back is the way forward, because Ger was making that point earlier on in the show as well. The likelihood, though, as you mentioned there, Stephen Kenny doing that is quite slim. But if you look at the potential positives, is there a sense as well that maybe with midfield options being a little bit slimmer, maybe that plays into the fact that actually if you play three at the back, you're just, I guess, spreading out your quality players in a more effective way? Like you pointed to Conor Hourihane injury as one thing that can surely have a detrimental impact on three in midfield. So I wonder, could that come into the thinking tonight?
Yeah, I think, look, what we have to be is resolute defensively. I think we have to be tough to beat. And when you play a back three, I think that gives you a bit of security at the back. But we've also got to carry a goal threat. And, that's something that we haven't done for quite some time. So I like the fact that we could, if you play three at the back, you can get two up top. You could play, Callum Robinson and Aaron Connolly up top, no problem at all. I like the fact that it gets Matt Doherty in his best position as a right wing back and the positions that he gets himself into when he plays in that role. I think he's much better going forward than he is defensively, and we saw that at Wolves so often. When he's been asked to play in a back four at Tottenham, he's not been quite as effective. He's not sure when to go forward. He's not sure when to defend. Whereas in a back three, he knows that role inside out, and he offers you a goal threat as well. He gets himself into attacking positions. You can play two holding midfield players and a number 10 in that position as well. So I think in that system, I think we are more resolute defensively and also carrying more of a goal threat as well. The problem is that Stephen hasn't necessarily had the chance to work on it. He's not had the time on the training grounds. It's not something that we've done previously. He's done previously. And in previous camps, we've had so many problems with injuries and COVID and all, it's well documented, the problems that he's had since he's taken over. So he's not had time on the training ground to work necessarily on that system. But I look at the players, and at club level, they suit that system. A lot of them, they play in that system in their clubs as well. So I personally think it's the way forward. But as you say, not had time on the training ground to work on it too much, the likelihood is he'll stick with the back four.
Just on the Matt Doherty point, so if there is a situation where Kenny plays a 4-3-3, chances are it might actually look more like a 4-2-3-1 if Serbia have more possession than maybe Luxembourg will at the weekend. On the right of that three, Matt Doherty essentially is a right winger. Is that an effective position for him? Is he too far ahead of play at that point sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, difficult. His best position is a wing back. That's quite clear. I know we've played Seamus at right back and Matt sort of a little bit further up previously. I think he can do it. I don't think he's as effective. I think when he comes from a little bit deeper and he can see the play ahead of him and how it's developing and when to make those runs, I think it's better for him. They could do it. I think you can get both of them in the team anyway by playing the back three, because I'd play Seamus in the back three anyway. So he's done it at Everton, and he's been doing it at Everton where I always think that when you play a back three as well, it's important that the two either side of the central defender are comfortable going into wide positions and defending 1v1, and Seamus can do that as well. So I think that's probably the best system to get them both into the side.
And would it be, in the hypothetical of the three at the back, would it be Duffy in the middle and Clark on the left of that three, and then Enda Stevens at left wing back?
Well, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I think, obviously Kieran's gone back into the team at Newcastle, and I personally think that's probably the best three right now. And as you say, Matt on the right and Enda on the left.
Who's your midfield tonight, Matt, if you're picking the team, assuming that the Serbia are going to start with a lot of really technically gifted players in advanced positions, so two really good quality number 10s in the pitch for them? Yeah,
I mean, again, it's really difficult because do you go with experience or do you go with the energy and the youthfulness and the exuberance of some of the players like a Jason Knight, for instance? I think Jason Knight probably plays. I think he's been really good this season. And then he's got decisions to make. Does he go with Josh Cullen, who's been in good form as well at club level? Jeff Hendrick. I mean, when I said about playing at number 10, I think Alan Brown comes into that little bit of attacking threat from midfield as well. But I mean, the likelihood is it's going to be a 4-3-3, which I think it'd be two holding midfield players and one slightly ahead maybe. Jason Knight, I think, and Josh Cullen, form-wise, probably deserve to start. But again, it's whether he goes with experience or not. I mean, I was at Brighton at the weekend, and Jeff came on in the game and didn't necessarily influence the match as much as he'd like to have done. He's struggling for form a little bit. But I like him. I like Jeff a lot. But at the moment, form-wise, you'd probably say he doesn't get into the three. Difficult call for Stephen, that.
Matt, do we just need to, at this point, recalibrate our expectations when it comes to the national team?
What'd you say? I missed that, sorry.
Do we just need to recalibrate our expectations? Like, we don't have enough players who are at the top level playing well at the moment.
Well, look, if you were a manager and you said you can pick one of the squads, Serbia or Ireland, and you had a free reign at picking the players from either squad, you'd probably pick Serbia. You're going to look at them and go, well, yeah, man for man, they're a better squad than us. But that's not always necessarily been the case in the past. We've managed to upset the odds previously. Ultimately, this is about finishing second in the group, I think. I mean, look, Portugal, we imagine will win the group, and then it's who comes second. So this game tonight is the most vital one in the campaign. Get off to a good start away from home at the team that we're fighting for second place with as well. I wouldn't necessarily give it up. I think the spirit has always been there and will always be there. But it is, if you were a manager, you'd probably pick the Serbia squad over ours at the moment.
The best hope we have is that a few of our players develop into much better players over the next couple of years. Some of the young lads like Aaron Connolly comes on and makes a giant leap. Like, we talked about Jason Knight. There's a possibility that he is a genuinely international class player. And this is very early on in their careers at international level. But it's nights like tonight is the opportunity for them to make that quantum leap.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have to have an element of patience, don't we? You know, when there's players who are sort of just coming into the fray, very young players, as you quite rightly say, and there's a lot of development still to be done with those players. You know, Stephen's a very good coach and will recognise that, you know, he can improve those players and make them better, albeit he doesn't get loads of time on the training ground with them. And so there has to be an element of patience, but we also, you know, we have to win games now as well, for the confidence of the squad and for the feeling around the place. We have to start getting results as well. So it's that balance. Yes, you want to bring young players on, you want to give them the chance, and you want to hope that at some point they are going to, you know, make themselves into top class international players. But I think at the same time we've got to get results now as well, and hope that some of them can turn in the performances that can do that for us.
A lot of the questions coming in on our comments matter around the scoring goals and just our inability to score goals so far. As a team, I don't know if you've ever had any experience of the entire group being in a bit of a rut, but what can you do to interrupt that pattern?
Well, I mean, I think you have to be positive in your passing and your decision making, and also I think you have to get people who are willing to get themselves into areas where they can score a goal. You know, I think when confidence is low and results haven't been going your way, you can often be safe in the way you pass the ball. You can be safe in the decisions that you make. You don't want to be the one that makes a mistake that costs you the game. When things are going well, it's instinctive. You don't think about things. You know, play the ball around the corner into your front man. You make a run beyond him. You know he's going to get a hold of it, and you trust the players that you're playing with. At the moment, we don't necessarily have that confidence, but I think you have to then sort of lift yourself above that and say, do you know what? I'm going to be the person that takes us on and shows the way forward for the rest. And yes, so I think that there has to be an element of positivity about us. As I said earlier, the shape, I think, of the team can dictate how you attack and how you defend. And that's why playing a back three gets you two up top and it also gets your wing backs into forward positions as well. So I think the shape of the team, but also I think, like I say, that the positivity of the individual. I think, you know, someone has to take it by the scruff of the neck. Someone has to be that person that says, I'm going to be the one that sort of rises above it and is positive with their passing, because when things are tough, you tend to take the easy option.
If it comes to it then tonight, there's one opportunity for Ireland, a la maybe Howard against Slovakia. Who is the number 9 you want on the end of it, Matt? Who is the guy that you can maybe say he will be the person to get Ireland out of this rut?
Blimey. My hope is that Aaron Connolly, you know, comes good. I mean, fitness-wise, obviously, we're still a little bit unsure of you know, where he's at, really. I mean, Shane Long's done it in the past. He's not a prolific goal scorer. Maybe he's, you know, someone at the... I always think Shane's better when he's instinctive as well, you know, and doesn't have time necessarily to think about things when he's playing, you know, an instinctive style. I like Troy Parrott. I mean, I've seen a bit of him at Ipswich, and he's a, you know, really good footballer and a composed footballer as well. I mean, Callum Robinson hasn't played a lot of football, but, you know, you just hope that one of those gets into a position and he's ice cold and can take it for us.
You've probably seen more of Troy Parrott recently than most Irish fans, to be honest. How ready is he to make an impact at some point during this international break, even if not tonight?
Well, I know that the club Ipswich are very pleased with the way he's done and the progress he's made. He's actually probably played a slightly deeper role, you know, like as a number 10 really than as an out and out centre forward. But his all-round game, I think, has impressed everybody. His movement and the positions he gets himself into. You know, I remember sort of Harry Kane going out on loan to places, and he went to Orient, and people weren't really sure. They thought, yeah, he's all right. He's not, you know, he's okay. He's not ripping it up at this level. You know, Troy, I think, has got the ability to play at a high level, and you know, technically, I think he's a very good player. But and as I say, people at Ipswich have been very impressed with his development. So hopefully, you know, he's a player that will come good for us.
Yeah, plenty of comments in this morning about Troy Parrott, actually. Jamie Daly said, personally, I feel Troy Parrott is the best number 9 and he should start. Why hasn't anyone mentioned his name? Well, Matt Holland is certainly mentioning his name this morning. Kieran says, Parrott has scored 1 goal in about 25 loan games with Ipswich and Millwall. He may come good yet, but nowhere near starting for Ireland yet, I hope. It's probably going to take a strange occurrence at some point over these next few games for Ireland to start scoring again. Maybe it is just that piece of luck. Maybe it is a kid like Parrott, maybe even in the Luxembourg game or whatever, who comes in and takes their opportunity. That whatever way we predict this at the moment, we might not actually see what's coming when it comes to actually scoring a goal.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the past we've had unlikely heroes and you know, people who've popped up with goals when we've needed them. So absolutely, it could be someone out the blue, someone that we're not even expecting, maybe even to start the game. It might be someone off the bench that comes on and is the hero. You know, and it's a great opportunity for these players to make themselves that as well if they do get the chance. So yeah, I don't care who it is. I don't care, you know, any one of the 20 odd players in the squad. If someone could be a hero, that'd be delightful.
How important is it to have Seamus Coleman back tonight? Like, just in terms of if they're trailing going into the final 10 minutes, that heads won't drop. He certainly strikes me as the type of fella that can only have a positive impact no matter what the scenario presents tonight. Yeah,
he's a great character, isn't he? And you know, you're not picking him for his character. You're picking him for his form as well and his ability. Mm-hmm. You know, I think he's been in great form this season and played some really good football. But the bonus is that he is a good talker, a good organiser, a good leader. Great to have on your side. You can see in his press conferences how he backs the players and backs his teammates. And he's such a positive character. So whilst that's all important and his experience is going to be vital tonight, he's also playing pretty well as well. So it's great that, you know, he's one of the players that is in good club form and ready to step up and do the job tonight.
Yeah, he certainly is. Is there a prediction that you've got at the tip of your tongue, Matt?
Well, goals is we're struggling for goals, aren't we? We know that. Listen, I'll take a 0-0 right now. if we got a 0-0, I'd take it right now. I think that it's going to be tough for us. Absolutely, it's going to be tough for us. As I said, my heart says a draw. My head says we might be on the end of a narrow defeat.
Right, 1-0 Serbia is kind of where you're leaning.
I'm going to go 0-0.
0-0. Good stuff. Matt Holland, great as ever to have you on the show. Thanks a million.
Pleasure. Keep well.
Cheers, Matt Holland there from Republic of Ireland International. We're bringing you some of our brilliant interview with Danny Murphy a little later this morning. But first of all, here's a snippet on how difficult he found it missing the 2005 Champions League final.
So there's some respect there for him and the job he did at the club. But yeah, it was a devastating moment because I never saw it coming. You never do.
Mm. I know you went to Charlton, and I know you especially enjoyed your first year at Charlton, but do you remember watching the 05 Champions League final, you know, behind the couch, you know, hands on your head, or was it okay, or do you even remember?
Do you know what? I do remember. I watched it on my own.
See, that doesn't sound good for a start.
I like watching football on my own anyway.
Okay, the tactics again.
Just to focus. I can't be doing people chatting to me while I'm watching it, you know.
Yeah.
But I remember Franny Jeffers, who was at Charlton at the time. He was Everton money. He was texting me through the first half, and I was gutted for the lads, you know, who were friends of mine, because I knew how desperately they wanted it. And then I suppose at the end of the game, when the celebration started, it was the first moment in the evening where I was struggling a bit with it, thinking I should be there. So it was a really bittersweet evening. You know, I spoke to the boys after to congratulate them. And, you know, I could feel their joy. It was, when you care for people, you can only be happy for them because, you know, I spent a lot of time with Karen and Stevie. But there was a part of me that was sick. There was a part of me that was gutted that I wasn't part of it. But then you have to just quickly get to a point where you go, took a while, by the way, where you go, you know what? Someone said to me, you're going to have 6 years, whatever it was, at Liverpool and win trophies play it with the shirt on of the team you love, play in front of the Kop. You know, score at Old Trafford, Goodison, whatever. I mean, come on. I mean, I'd have snatched your hand off. It's be thankful what you've had, not what you didn't have, you know.
That's a good life lesson there from Danny Murphy this morning. If you want to get in touch or if you want to see that full interview, don't worry. We have it coming for you around about 9:30. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. A reminder, of course, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Now, in 12 days, maybe it's a little bit less now, the Women's Six Nations is going to kick off. And I'm delighted to say Ali Donnelly is with us to talk to us about this morning. Ali, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So listen, we actually wanted to get you on after you tweeted about the fact that we didn't know when the fixtures and kickoffs and where the broadcasts were going to be. In the last 24 hours, everything has been solved. The fixtures are published. We now know exactly who will be broadcasting the matches and when. But it is a bit late in the day, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, on a positive side, we got the fixtures now. We know where we can watch them, and there's quite a lot of broadcast activity going on. So most people will be able to watch most of the games in some way or other, either on the RTE or BBC or on Eurosport Player in France. So I think that's a good thing, first and foremost, to see lots of broadcast interest, because we need that. But yeah, I mean, I was just frustrated. I felt like, it was a slight backward step, actually. I've been writing about the Women's Six Nations for a long, long time, and I don't think we've ever gone this close to the wire in sort of knowing when you can watch the games. And I guess it's been a really positive few weeks for women's rugby. We've had World Rugby's big announcement of their 16-team tournament starting in 2023, and so it just felt like, this is a moment where we might actually be able to attract some sponsors, some commercial partners and so on. And yet, we don't have our house in order, I think, in terms of presenting ourselves as a really professional sport and a sport that is sort of ready to take the next step in terms of that commercial activity, which will be vital to taking women's rugby forward. So I was a bit disappointed. I think, you have to have your own house in order if you want to, take that step. And it didn't quite look like that. I think it just looked very bad.
And what's stopping rugby from having its house in order when it comes to the women's game at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a vicious circle, because you've got to be able to attract the kind of sponsorship and the investment that helps you to grow and to kind of maximise, where you're going. But you're not going to get that if brands are looking at you and you look amateur and you look sort of unprofessional. So, you've got to, we need the people who are running the game to understand that. And I think for me, it was particularly frustrating. I live in London, and the huge news this week for women's football, which, is many, many years ahead of women's rugby in terms of its development for sure. But you sort of had the two contrasting things. They were able to announce next season's fixtures and a huge broadcasting deal. And, you're almost, for me, running a website, writing women's rugby, apologetically begging for, fixture dates, which are just a week away. So I think it just presents itself as amateur. And the players, frankly, deserve a bit better. Most of the players in the Six Nations are amateur players, and, they want their families to watch, they want their friends to watch, just as a standard basic thing. And to not be able to tell them till the week before is disappointing. And it overshadows, I think, some really good stuff happening. And that's what I'd much rather be talking about.
Well, let's talk about the good stuff briefly so that we can cover that off. There's renewed chatter about a potential for a Lions tour at some point in the future. At least that conversation has started now. And once those conversations start, it's kind of hard to get the genie back at the bottle. You talked about the big announcement from World Rugby, and we covered it a little bit in the show. Now that the kind of dust has settled on the announcement, what practically do you think it will mean for the evolution of the women's game over the next decade or so?
Yeah, it's a hugely important step. I mean, the structure is definitely, it's not perfect, but I'm not sure there was a perfect structure when you're talking about a sport that only has, a handful of really competitive teams at the top. And as soon as World Rugby said that there'd be a 16-team Women's Rugby World Cup in 2025, it had to do something, because we didn't have 16 competitive teams. So I think it's really important. And I think if you look at what actually happens in the test world in women's rugby, in the last calendar year before COVID, so, talking January to December 2019, the top 16 teams in the world played an average of just 6 test matches. Australia only played 4. So, this tournament is actually going to give teams a significantly kind of improved number of games. So the minimum number of tests any of these 16 teams will play in a year will be 6, and the average will be much closer to 9. So I think that's really, really important. And also, talking about, making our game look more professional, having those 3 set windows, having regional qualifiers earlier in the year with a cutoff point, that is attractive to broadcasters, it's attractive to brands because, they're very specific packages, for want of a better way of saying it. So, it's going to take time. It's not coming in for a couple of years because of the delay to the World Cup next year. But it's a really positive step and, there's a lot to sort out, but, it's a good thing for the game, definitely.
So that's at the global level that has been sorted out. It seems as if the problem around the Six Nations particularly is a more local and specific to the individual unions themselves. And it still seems kind of just that there's a sense that the women's game hasn't yet been taken as seriously by the unions as it needs to be, and that they're missing a trick there.
Well, some unions less than others. I think, you'd have to say that England and France in particular, they have seen the opportunity and they've invested in their programs and in their players and so on. But I think as well, we have an organising committee. There is a Six Nations organisation who are responsible for, more than just, I think what I was saying this week is, it's not, you can't consider a success just getting the games played. It's everything around it. It is finding a title sponsor. It is, kick-off times that don't overlap, which thankfully they don't this time. It is giving the teams, maximum game time. And I think back to the sort of positives, a lot of, I've certainly been asking for years through my writing anyway, for the Women's Six Nations to be moved. We have that now. It's got a standalone window. I would have preferred there to be the same number of games, and there aren't. But I think, there are slow steps forward. And then it just seems to me that, that there isn't quite the belief in the grasping of the opportunity. I know Brett Cosper has stepped down as the CEO of World Rugby now, but he used to say all the time, that the development of women in rugby is the single biggest opportunity for rugby to grow over the next decade. And I think we need everyone to believe that and to have the patience and the vision, to move the game forward and not sort of see it as, I wouldn't say it's box ticking, but to see it as something that is an add-on as opposed to something that actually can give the game, revenue in the future and profit in the future, ideally. But you have to put the steps in place, and I'm not entirely sure we saw that this week.
It'll be interesting then.
Revenue. So go on, sorry.
Sorry, well, I was just going to say it'll be interesting to see what happens then when WXV is implemented. If countries around the world almost have a positive influence on some of the Six Nations countries. Like we had Anna Capeless on last week, and she mentioned Canada and some of the great work they're doing, that a non-traditional rugby country like Canada could perhaps be having their house in order ahead of a country like Ireland potentially at that point. That influence might actually be a positive in the long run, even though that isn't how things should work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Canada's a really interesting comparison because Sevens has obviously given them a stream of investment that they never would have had before, because when you start playing sevens in an Olympic sport, you get access to other funding that 15s doesn't. So Canada's been able to kind of leverage the success that it's had on the sevens front into its 15s programs. But, Canada should not be in terms of its structures and programs and investments ahead of Ireland. It just, it doesn't have the same player base. It doesn't have the kind of historical investment in rugby. But I think, as I didn't hear Anna's interview, but if you've got people who are leading your game with vision and they understand how to bring money into the sport, then anybody can get ahead. Doesn't matter if you're considered one of those sort of tier one nations as we tend to look at rugby. Doesn't really matter. And women's rugby, it's still I wouldn't say it's a sport in its infancy anymore, but it's a growing sport. It's a growth sport. And you have to sort of have a vision when you are investing in or when you are building structures for a growth sport. It isn't something that you can sort of say, we'll do what we do for the men's game and it will happen. You've got to sort of be patient. And I say this a lot when I talk about, how you attract sponsors and investment. We need brands, organizations, unions, international federations who are patient and can see a long-term vision and, who will build the steps slowly. And it will be really interesting to see which countries step up to the plate in World Rugby's new tournament. But, it's still a long way off.
I think as well the media have a role to play, and particularly the terrestrial television broadcasters who have loads of space and have lost generally, like Premier League soccer, for example, is never going to be again, really, barring COVID, on terrestrial TV, but there's loads of space for them now, as we've seen with women's football. They can do the same as CBC, more than likely move stuff behind a paywall I think there's a big opportunity for terrestrial broadcasters to step in, and particularly state broadcasters.
I 100% agree. I mean, I actually sort of tongue-in-cheek tweeted a couple of weeks ago that the great, men's rugby moving behind a paywall means, women's rugby might be the only kind of free-to-air rugby that people get to see. But I was only half joking, and there's an opportunity there for sure. And I think, in the Six Nations, Women's Six Nations coming up, BBC are showing some of the games on iPlayer, but they're showing the England's final game, BBC Two, and that's a huge step. We've actually never had. Here in the UK, we've never had a Women's Six Nations game on terrestrial television like that, which I had to check when I saw the press release that was true, but it is. And, I guess in Ireland, we've been lucky. I think RTE have done a really good job, and, they do show the games live and they do commit to it. So, it's really quite a big opportunity. And you mentioned women's football, the deal that the WSL through the FA have done here with Sky and BBC is really interesting, because they're getting both. They're getting that sort of income stream from pay TV, but also access to free-to-air audience, which when you're a growing sport is absolutely key. You need people to be able to see it.
On that WSL deal, Ali, I might be putting you on the spot here a little bit, but I know that obviously BT had a lot of the rights to that for a while, and I guess there was a little bit of experimentation with having the WSL behind a paywall. Is there an immediate future for that for women's rugby to go behind a paywall? Because obviously you get less eyeballs on it, full stop, if you want to attract new viewers. But sometimes it has been said about sport that the production quality is better. There's just a better attention put into it, and those people who are flicking between the sports channels anyway will have a passion about what they're watching anyway. And I think that point has been made about the men's Six Nations maybe potentially going behind a paywall, that people who really want it will get it. What is your opinion on that, and how pay companies have dealt with women's sport, I guess, over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the broadcasters here, BT, Sky, etc., should be commended, I think, for taking taking a leap into the unknown in some ways with women's sports. They didn't know what kind of audiences they'd get, and Sky show women's netball here, and you mentioned BT in the football. I mean, my challenge for that is that with the growth sport, and women's rugby absolutely is, it is really risky to put it behind a paywall, because sure, the small kind of dedicated audience will find it, but it is a small dedicated audience right now, in part because it's so hard to watch it, and it hasn't really been given the opportunity. I mean, I think the great comparison probably is when we had the Women's Football World Cup in 2019 on the BBC, and the audiences were, 10 million, upwards of 10 million, it's huge here because people could watch it, and you would never get that, those numbers. And it's a World Cup, it's different, but you wouldn't get those numbers watching a comparable WSL game on BT Sports, in part because pay TV obviously gives you a smaller audience. So I would much prefer, although, in some ways, you can't be choosers always when, you're coming to the party with smaller numbers to offer, there to be free to air. And I think that's why the women's football deal is so extraordinary, because they've managed to do both. They've managed this really proper kind of successful looking hybrid where there will be some pay TV games for, that'll give them some interesting revenue streams, but there will also be an opportunity for everybody else to watch it on the BBC. And, we're miles away from that in women's rugby. I mean, this is years down the line, but I do think one of the things that has been interesting has been the streaming. So I know the quality is not always as good, but it's important, I think, to, a lot of the test games in the last few years, 2018-19 in women's rugby, were streamed, and more unions are putting investment into that. You can watch, for example, almost all of the Women's Premier 15s league here, the Allianz 15s it's called, on some stream or other, and a lot of clubs invest in commentary too. So that is also a sort of a slightly different package that, perhaps could be monetized.
Yeah, it's a nice little ecosystem when you put it all together. Ali, I had one last question. You talked about the investment that the English and the French rugby unions in particular, and the professionalism of the women's teams that they have. Ireland obviously had done well almost a decade ago at this point with a team that kind of captured the imagination of the public and that beat the All Blacks. And it seems like we made the decision strategically to back our sevens team and to invest in the women's game that way. Looking back now, is it hindsight? And I know a lot of people at the time were saying that was the wrong thing to do. Should we have continued to invest in the 15s?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the RFU would say that they have, but I think in fairness to them, nobody really knew what to do with their women's sevens programs. And some countries, just went for it with sevens and invested everything into that. Other countries, decided not to do that. And no one really knew. It was very early days. You suddenly had, after 2009, there's an Olympic programme and all this new funding came into the sport and no one really knew how quite to work it. Particularly, I suppose, if a country like Ireland doesn't have huge playing numbers. And I don't know the latest figures that the RFU have, but I suspect it's not more than a couple of thousand adult women playing. So it's a tiny, comparably to the countries they're competing with, and the player base is very small. So I give them a little bit of slack for that. I think what has failed to happen is, building on the success of that team out of 2014, in 2015 in particular, we haven't really had that, and it's been confusing. Where is the focus? Is it sevens? Is it 15s? And Ireland, they haven't qualified for the World Cup yet, and I think that would be an enormous failure. I think they will qualify for the World Cup, and I think they'll do probably quite well over the next year or so. They seem to have a team with a good mix of experience, some youngsters coming through. It'd be great to watch them play in a few weeks' time against Wales, just to see where teams are at. I mean, no one's played in a year. England and France have played. But I think it's hard to say, the wrong thing or the right thing was done with sevens or 15s. Everybody was finding their way with it. But I think they need to be very clear now about what the future is and where their investment will go, because they will fall behind. If we have a top 6 tier, the tier 1 of this new league structure, and Ireland want to be in that, they're going to have to be investing, and they're going to have to be investing in their players too, because you've got a fully professional England team, a semi-pro France team. It's going to be hard to keep up with those teams unless you have kind of clear pathways, clear structures and clear investments.
100%. Ali, always great to talk to you. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Thank you both.
You can follow Ali Donnelly at Scrum Queens on Twitter as well. Now, usually at this time on a Wednesday morning on OTB AM, we'll be chatting with friend of the show, Fergus McNally, who is our HSE quit candidate. He's trying to quit smoking at the moment successfully. He's also the Irish football kit man, so obviously he's a little bit busy, and we decided not to hassle him on the morning of the game against Serbia. So we're going to catch up with him again next Wednesday morning. Just a reminder though, HSE Quit Service provides personalised free support by phone, email, SMS and live chat. Smokers can free call 1-800-201-203 or visit quit.ie for stop smoking tips and resources. If you quit smoking for 28 days, you're 5 times more likely to quit for good. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio for you across the rest of the day today. At 1 o'clock, it's OTB Gold. Michael Owen talking about his life after football. Mount Rushmore is Donegal at 3 o'clock. Paul Rouse talking about the 1982 Offaly hurlers, maybe the Offaly footballers. OTB Gold is Dennis Ogie-Moran at 6, and at 7 o'clock tonight, it's live commentary of Serbia against Ireland with Nathan Murphy and Stewie Byrne. We're back after these with Neil Treacy in the Type 5 as we talk the fallout from the Six Nations, the latest with the Lions, the Pro 14 final where all the Munster people think they're going to win.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.
We've collected data, a belief test on 213,000 kids. But my concern is I think the top 75% are pretty okay.
Right.
I think the bottom 25% are falling off a cliff. Falling off a cliff. And I think probably that bottom even 20% will result in probably 90% of healthcare spending in 50 years, 60 years.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Tom Watson, you're welcome to Golf Weekly.
Hey, this is going to be fun.
Very happy to say European captain and, of course, 3-time major winner Padraig Carrington joins us.
Today's special guest on Golf Weekly is Lee Westwood.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm honoured and delighted.
Let's bring in Paul McGinley, who joins us now. Paul, you're very welcome.
Shane Lowry, how are you keeping?
I'm good, thanks, yeah. Well, I'm as good as I can be.
The biggest names in golf and Ireland's best golf podcast, Golf Weekly, now exclusively available on Patreon. Go to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly to sign up now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
It's just coming up on 9 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. It's Ger Eoin and Owen Sheehan with you every morning from 7:30 all the way through until 10. You can listen to us as a radio show if you're driving about your car, or if you're stuck in your house and you want to listen to us on your Alexa. Just say, Alexa, play OTB Sports Radio. That might cause some difficulties in this room if I'm not careful. Anyway, Owen is with us, as is Neil Treacy, which means that it's time for the Type 5. Neil, how are you?
I'm very well, guys. How are you doing?
Good. Where are we starting?
We're going to start a bit of Tyburn craftiness. So I'm going to say craftiness as well, with a huge degree of self-awareness, because this is craftiness in the Do you know on the BBC when Harry Kane wins a penalty and they say, "Oh, that was clever play by Harry Kane there," rather than actually pointing out that he, completely floundered all the rules in the book. In short here, basically, Tadhg Beirne, this is an example of him basically mugging off England and the referee Matthew Raynell. So yeah, this is at a really crucial point in the game too. Right after the start of the second half, Ireland 14 points up. England started the second half really well, won an early penalty, kicked it down into the corner for a 5-metre line out. And look, if they score a try here, it's a 7-point game potentially with pretty much the entire second half to go. Could be a very, very different situation. But as we can see here on our first picture in front of us, I'm going to ask you, Ger, as well, because I know you can see this in front of you. What do you see here? I'm going to see if you've done your homework over the last couple of weeks of tight fives.
I see the English doing that thing that Tadhg Beirne was getting pinged for, where Tom Curry's on the wrong side of the person who's caught the ball.
Correct, Ger. Gold star for you. So that's right. That's our good old friend obstruction over the last couple of weeks. Something Ireland were caught a couple of times with against Italy and against Scotland as well last week. So Charlie Ewels has taken the line out. Tom Curry's obstructing the Irish defenders. Carbon copy, as we said, of what we pointed out Ireland doing. So now let's put up our second picture. This is the reverse angle. So we can flip it around. We can see Charlie Ewels is in the air. Tom Curry is lifting him from the back. And there's Tadhg Beirne with his arms wrapped around Tom Curry. So straight away, like that's taking out a lifter. That is a penalty all day in the book. So if we move on to our third picture, what we can see here is what Tadhg Beirne has actually done is he has bound onto Tom Curry as he's still lifting. And when they've hit the ground, he has actually dragged Tom Curry in behind Charlie Ewels to pretty much paint the picture of Tom Curry obstructing the Irish defenders. So it looks like obstruction all day long, but it's completely manufactured by Tadhg Beirne. And Matthew Raynell, unfortunately for him, bought it all day. Well, I say all day, bought it on that one, straight up. And penalty Ireland, clear the lines. It's the type of dark arts and it's the type of craftiness that you would have seen the likes of Richie McCaw get away with so often. Look, it's completely against the rules. Completely against the rules.
Beauty.
But that's what you...
one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It's like, it's absolute sheer, unadulterated genius. Hook this to my veins, Neil Treacy.
Yeah,
Hook
and
this
look...
to my veins, Tadhg Beirne. This is like, make this man the King of Ireland.
It's the ability that he's developed over the last couple of years as well to do this sort of stuff and get away with it. Like it's the mark of all great, I say back rows, okay, officially he was playing second row, but it's what you think of when you think of a great seven. A great open side flanker, the ability to just do that sort of stuff and consistently get away with it. What I can't understand is how he manages to get away with those things wearing a bright blue scrum cap, because he's the most identifiable player on the pitch when he does it as well. But look, completely got away with it. It was obviously a calculated moment to try it. It could have been very, very costly if they got pinged, but they didn't. So it was a great decision. And look,
I suggest that we club together to get him a camo scrum cap, so that he's invisible. It's like an invisible shield. That, like, we could all chip together a $5 each. The lads in the YouTube comments can do that, and we'll send one to him and say, "Here, listen, we like what you do. Just don't get caught."
Think of all the things he could do if he wasn't easily identifiable as well. And look, I said self-awareness at the start as well. If England had done this to Ireland and it cost us a try 5 metres from the line, we would be up in arms about it. I would be here pointing out this disgraceful English behaviour. And how Ireland were absolutely robbed of a try, but Ireland got away with it, so it was really good.
Yeah, they're not
more Tadhg Beirne.
More Tadhg Beirne. We have a second one. This time, clever play, but not illegal. This is just really, really good work from Tadhg Beirne, and I suppose from Johnny Sexton making the kick, and from Ian Henderson and Tadhg Furlong, who have to kind of time their runs as well to go with it. So the context of this, England have just scored to make it 10-6. Ireland about to restart the game. End result of this is going to be an Ireland scrum. They turn over the ball, which was then turned into a penalty for Mako Vunipola collapsing, and that became 3 points for Ireland to make it 13-6. So this first picture, we're looking at two things to look at. First being our pot of 3 forwards circled in the yellow. Top of the circle is Tadhg Beirne, below him is Furlong, and then Ian Henderson is below that. They're going to be running straight out full tilt. But we need to have someone a bit faster chasing that up as well. So we've got Jacob Stockdale with the big blue arrow. He's going to make a beeline for Maro Itoje, where Ireland are trying to drop that ball. So basically it's kind of a two-pronged way of approaching it. Jacob Stockdale is going to be first up. If England don't lift Maro Itoje, or if someone else catches the ball, you have someone a bit quicker to get up there. If England go for a lift, which is obviously a much slower process, you've got the heavy artillery in the likes of Tyg Byrne, Ian Henderson and Tyg Furlong as well. So we're going to go to our second slide, kick-off 2. So as you can see, they lifted a Itoje. That black arrow basically is Jacob Stockdale. He just runs by, he gets out of the way once he knows, because he's going at full speed. If he collides with those forwards, Ireland are in trouble. So he just gets out of the way and runs past. But what I want to look at is the plan here is for those 3 players, Tyg Byrne, Tyg Furlong and Ian Henderson, to basically engulf Maro Itoje. So the red arrow looping around the back, that's where Tyg Furlong is going to run in behind the lifting pod of England and try latch onto the ball and latch onto Maro Itoje and hold him up. Whereas the 2 yellow arrows, Tyg Furlong on the right and Ian Henderson at the bottom of the screen, they're going to come from the forward. But the timing here has to be absolutely perfect, because first they have to wait for Itoje to come to the ground. Obviously they can't touch him in the air. That would be a penalty to England. But also they need to make sure as well that Tyg Byrne touches Itoje or any of those English players before Tyg Furlong and Ian Henderson do. Because if Furlong and Ian Henderson latch onto those players as soon as they hit the ground before Tyg Byrne gets out, we might just get the picture back up again. That one, yeah, we'll just get that back up again. So if either of those 2 players touches the English pod before Tyg Byrne does, that creates a maul, and that means there's an offside line, which means that Tyg Byrne can't go around. So Tyg Byrne has to be in there beforehand, because until an Irish player touches it, a maul isn't formed and there isn't going to be an offside line. Kick from Johnny Sexton, because you get a huge amount of hang time up there for those guys to come around, and for Tyg Byrne even to be able to navigate around that corner. And basically, after that, it's just wrapping yourself around them like a boa constrictor, holding things up. The maul goes to ground. Ireland win a scrum, then they win a penalty, and it's 3 more points to Ireland. So on our next point then, it got us thinking about the Irish kick-off and their restart setup. So on that last turnover, as I was saying, it felt like Ireland were kind of targeting that move, that they knew that Tyg Byrne would basically have that little corner to come around, that there wouldn't be an English player blocking there, kind of guarding the door as such. So I wanted to have a look at how the sides were setting up. So if we move on to our kick-off 5 slide, as we can see, that this is how England were setting up for kick-offs and restarts. Essentially, they have 2 pods of forwards, 1 on either side of the pitch. The red circle, as you can see at the top, and then the one at the bottom, which is Itoje in the middle, and Luke Cowan-Dickey and Kyle Sinclair are his lifters. Owen Farrell then is kind of sitting in the middle of those 2 pods, just kind of guarding the 10-metre line in case there's a short kick. So I want to look at those arrows specifically, those 2 yellow arrows. And apologies for anyone listening to this rather than watching it, but you can watch back the video streams on YouTube and Periscope as well. So they are basically reacting to Maro Itoje like they did. As soon as Itoje moves towards it, they will move towards him and lift it. But what that does is, at the front of Maro Itoje is Luke Cowan-Dickey. So once he moves back towards Itoje, that is basically leaving quite a big gap for someone like Tyg Byrne to run into. Ideally, Owen Farrell would be getting back into that space to create even just some bit of traffic, not even just completely blocking him off, but giving him something to navigate before he can get around that corner. Of other teams, Wales have a similar setup to that as well. France have something similar-ish, but they have another player in that midfield space kind of around where Owen Farrell would be. So they have another bit of another player for someone to navigate if they want to get through. Scotland and Ireland have very similar setups, as we're going to see with Ireland here now. So what Ireland have is completely different. They have, if we move on to our next slide there, Emma, please. Yeah, so this is Ireland's setup. As you can see, there are actually 4 pods going across the pitch, 4 2-man pods. The top one on the far side of the screen, that is Tyg Furlong and Ian Henderson. Below them then is CJ Stander and Rob Herring. Then below that is Bundyaki and Josh van der Fleer. So they are more than likely going to be the bit of speed up there as well. So in case there is a kick towards the 10-metre line, just a little short chip, that they can get up there and cover that space. And then below them on the near touch line, you have Tyg Byrne and Dave Kilcoyne. So the logic would be if the ball goes towards Byrne, Kilcoyne can lift him, one man, get him up in the air. Josh van der Fleer can then come from pod number 3 and support. If it goes to the other side of the pitch, Ian Henderson will probably be lifted by Tyg Furlong, and one of the other pods, Rob Herring and CJ Stander, can move across to help out. If it goes central to either of those 2 central pods, as you can see, you have Jack Conan standing on the 22. He can kind of just float in between and get to each one. It just seems a little bit more adaptable, and it means that you probably have more players in that line to kind of to get in the way of the opposition and just half a second more for someone if the ball goes deeper.
Neil, who designs this?
I suppose looking at the coaching setup, that one I wouldn't be too certain of. That would probably be a collective decision. Like off the top of my head, it wouldn't specifically be falling into anyone's specific brief. I would say there's a
bit. Is that technically defence?
Probably.
How you receive a kickoff?
I would say it possibly comes in under that. Yeah, I honestly wouldn't know who would be specifically in charge of that. But like, do you get the point there that there is one or two more bodies to be able to kind of create a little bit of traffic, and each pod can kind of help out the other one when needed?
There's obviously weaknesses and strengths to both of them. So if you say, for example, you've got, did you say Furlong lifting Henderson? That's like Furlong obviously unbelievably strong, so I'm sure he's capable of doing it. But Henderson's a big beast. Is there any weakness that the opposition can exploit in terms of you're less protected because you've got fewer bodies, or is it about the speed at which your own cavalry arrives?
Yeah, it's probably down to your own application of it and the speed that they arrive. Like the likes of, I think most props are generally able to hoist their player into the air, because Henderson and Tig Byrne, as example of those two main jumpers, like they will be able to get themselves into the air, and you'd see it a lot. Tig Furlong would have absolutely no problems whatsoever giving Ian Henderson or giving Tig Byrne or whoever his second row is, James Ryan, giving them that bit of assistance to get them right up into the air. And by the time they're up in the air, you will probably have that second player arriving who can kind of help bring them back down safely. Like one man lifts or something you'd see absolutely regularly in the game.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the weights here. I think trying to find Tig Byrne's weight. Sorry, but Henderson's weight is 117 and Tig Byrne's 113. So there's not that much difference.
Yeah, look, these guys, international props, they're well able to hoist someone up into the air if needed. One man, you'd see it quite often, I would say.
Sounds like a tough job.
That's why they're there. Well, look, we'll move on to the next one, which is Ireland's scrum. Ireland pretty much dominated the scrum at the weekend. Maka Vunipola gave away 2 penalties and a free kick in the first half. He was hauled off at half time. But I couldn't not talk about the scrum that led to the Tig Furlong celebration gif in the second half. England actually chose to scrum here, interestingly enough, after Ireland had given away a free kick at the initial one. Then we had a reset in which Ireland actually pretty much walked through England. So I think Matthew Raynell reset it, knowing that Ireland were pretty much on top, and kind of gave England a second chance to win back the ball. But we'll look at this first picture here. So to start with, I want to look at the contrast in the body shapes of the two packs, and specifically the two number 8s. So Jack Conan on your left, you could pretty much balance a pint of Guinness on his back the way he is set up. It's absolutely perfect. His back is parallel to the ground, head is level with his backside, hips are bent just beyond 90 degrees, and as we'd seen in previous weeks, arms are tucked in under his second rows like we spoke about. Now I want to look at Billy Vunipola. Head is below his hips, knees are in front of his arse. Basically, he's not really offering much support to that scrum whatsoever. Just the balance of power, the way it's coming through, like he's just not set up correctly. What you want is a flat back. You want your just over 90 degrees at the hips. But as you can see, it's pretty much an acute angle at the hips. His head is bent down low. He's driving into the ground while the rest of his team are driving straight along, and just not really offering that much support at all. The other bit to look at as well is the bind of both Tig Furlong and Ellis Genge, which we've highlighted here. Genge's bind is way too short, so as you can see, his elbow is pointing down towards the ground. What you want is for that elbow to be right up at head level, to be coming out towards the side, because when your bind is that short, it's much easier for a tight head to just pull you down and turn you inside, as we're going to see on the next clip here. As we see, that's exactly what Tig Furlong does. He shortens his bind down onto Genge's arm. Binding on the arm, look, it's not legal, but Genge has given him pretty much an open goal to go for. And Furlong's then able to pull him in tight as he drives through. So Genge's left shoulder is now down below his right shoulder, so his weight isn't evenly distributed. He's got less power than he should have. The X, I should just say as well, that's just marking where the ball is. So as we can see, they haven't even got it back to the base of the scrum yet. So Genge is also having to help out with the hook. And then again, if we look at the number 8s, Jack Conan again hasn't changed an inch. He's driving straight along parallel to the floor, while Billy Vunipola is now standing up because the English scrum is starting to go backwards. Then we move on to our next slide, scrum number 3. So Ireland take advantage. They're marching through. What I do like about this, though, is that Cian Healy, and he's followed by the rest of his teammates as well, is that he just keeps walking straight up the pitch, leaving England behind. So a lot of scrummaging, it's about the pictures that you're painting for the referee. You're showing the referee what you want him to see. And a lot of the time when a scrum starts to wheel and one team is getting on top of the other, the dominant prop kind of tends to follow the other prop. So if you're going forward and all of a sudden your opposition prop starts to turn and wheel just to get out of danger, if you just keep following around, eventually you're not driving straight, and the referee could well just ping you and decide that you're kind of boring in at an angle. So what Healy is doing there is he's just decided to keep going straight no matter what happens. So Tadhg Furlong has started to turn, but Healy just pretty much drives out of the scrum. And if we move on to the next slide as well, we can see that all the Irish forwards have just decided to come straight through as well. They've decided not to follow where England are going. They're just going to go straight up the pitch. And if we move on to our next slide, we can actually just see from the other angle as well. Remember when I spoke about Ellis Genge's bind and how his elbow was pointing down towards the ground a couple of minutes ago? So This is what you can see from Cian Healy. This is where the elbow should be. It should be cocked out towards the left with your arm essentially parallel to the ground and your elbow up at head height. That's what you want from your loose head. Elbow cocked up into the air like that. And if we move it on to the next one, this is, as I said, about the way all the players just kept driving forward. This is just beautiful. Look at the uniformity of that. All 8 forwards, still, even after the scrum is turning, they're all driving in the same direction. Every single one of them parallel to each other. It's very, very easy once a scrum starts to turn for the second rows to kind of jackknife. Do you know the way when you'd see a truck jackknifing with, you know, the cabin of it going one way and the cargo going the other? That can happen a lot with second rows, where your front row are driving one way and the second rows continue to drive straight, and you kind of get that jackknifing action. But for all of those players to drive straight through like that, it just sends a really, really good message to the referee. Look, he has the whistle in his mouth. He's ready to award the penalty anyway. But even for future games, it just paints really, really good pictures for the referee.
Why is Vunipola doing that at that stage of the game? Is it exhaustion? Why is his technique letting him down an hour into the match against Ireland?
I don't know. I'll be totally honest. Like, it really shouldn't. I think he's probably just a bit more concerned with... He's ready to just pick up the ball and make a break for it off the back of that scrum, or to pop it out to Ben Youngs or whoever is in at scrum half for that particular scrum. Like, I suppose Jack Conan is able to set up like that as well because he's the defensive number 8 in that situation. So he is pretty much just concentrating on driving the scrum. He's not necessarily worried about where the ball is going to be coming back. But like Vunipola, he doesn't have to be, you know, part of this 8-man shove. He doesn't have to be driving for his life. But just setting up correctly and being ready, just having your body at a correct angle is just very, very important.
Okay. That was the one that Tadhg Furlong ended up doing his river dance celebration.
Yes. Had to mention that one.
And then finally for now, the Lions, squad positions that are still wide open.
Yeah, so obviously we got the news yesterday that they're planning to go ahead as normal, and like everyone's been thrown together. What's my Lions 15? What's my Lions squad going to be after the close of the Six Nations? There's still so much rugby to play as well when you consider the 4 more rounds of Champions and Challenge Cup as well, tail end of the Premiership to come as well, and the Pro 14 final and that Rainbow Cup with the South African sides. But there are a couple of positions, 3 actually I think in particular, where even selection for the wider squad is so open at the moment. Never mind who's actually going to nail down the starting position. One is loosehead prop, so if you think realistically they're probably going to take 3 loosehead props. I'm struggling to separate Wyn Jones, Rory Sutherland, Cian Healy and Mako Vunipola, and who is the one that misses out there. I think if you're actually going on 4, Mako Vunipola is probably the least in form of those 4. Even someone like Ellis Genge as well would be interesting. But of those 4, like Mako Vunipola probably isn't in good form. I think the performance on Saturday will go against him as well, but he has all that experience as well. Wyn Jones has been excellent in the Six Nations. He's probably been the best loosehead prop over the course of the 5 rounds of games. Rory Sutherland is the loosehead prop everyone was talking about coming into the tournament. He's done a fine job. He hasn't kind of blown us away with his form, and I think he's probably still in the mix to definitely be in the squad. But someone high profile is going to be missing out of that 4. Also at scrum half, I think this one is completely wide open who you're going to be bringing. Are they going to be bringing 2 or 3 scrum halves? You've Ben Youngs, Gareth Davies, everyone is talking about after his performance over the last couple of games. Thomas Williams even. Like Wales have 3 contenders. Kieran Hardy was brilliant in the couple of games he got to play. Ali Price has been really good for Scotland. Conor Murray might have been on the periphery, but he put in an excellent performance at the weekend, and a few more consistent performances could put him back in the mix as well. Even Jamieson Gibson-Park, if Warren Gatland wants something different as well. There are so many positions that are wide, so many places that are wide open there with scrum half. Out half as well. I think Owen Farrell is probably the only absolute guaranteed lock to be starting at out half or not starting even at out half, but to be in the squad at out half. Finn Russell, everyone was talking about him before the tournament. He hasn't really set the world alight, I'll be totally honest. Johnny Sexton, his last couple of games in the Six Nations were really, really good. He's brought himself back into it. Dan Biggar has been okay at times. Callum Sheedy is the outsider of that group as well. And then you even have someone like Joe Simmons in the Premiership who's not getting a look in, or Marcus Smith, who are turning up trees in the Premiership, but Eddie Jones isn't even looking at him. So I think there's going to be some really interesting calls and players to look out for over the next few weeks.
Okay, we've got like 30 seconds left here. The Leinster-Munster game is like not quite a final line selector, but there are some players who I think have the capability. If Conor Murray plays brilliantly at the weekend against Leinster and Munster win, then it's going to be very hard for Warren Gatland, who spent last week embedded with the team as Murray rediscovered his form and was key to Ireland beating England. Very hard for him not to pick him.
Yeah, I think so, and it's why I mentioned like Ben Youngs as well. I think you've a couple of players like that who they have so much experience that if they start showing those glimpses of form coming up into the summer, it's going to be very hard to look past them. Particularly as well, like Talupe Faletau is someone who timed his form coming back from injuries as well perfectly this year. He has all that experience, and again over the last couple of months he's been brilliant, and like he looks like a lock now to be in the Six Nations squad, or in the Lions squad.
And probably starting in the team as well. Yesterday you were predicting that you think that Munster are going to win this weekend. Are you sticking to that as the week goes on, getting more and more confident?
Yeah, I think I will. I won't budge from it. I think their time is coming. I think Leinster, not that they're going to have one eye on winning the Champions Cup quarter or last 16 against Toulon, but I think this weekend, I think Munster are going to be eyeing this a little bit more than Leinster will be. I think for most Munster fans, if you offer them the opportunity to beat Leinster this weekend, if they were going to lose then the following week in their last 16 game against Toulouse, I think they would take it. Where I think if you were to say it to Leinster fans, they would say, no, I'd probably win next week against Toulon.
They kill your granny for it, Neil, I believe is the phrase.
Probably would, yeah.
Yeah. And sure, look, that's what we need. That's what Irish rugby needs. Owen's been very quiet there, silently getting more and more confident as the week goes on that Munster are going to kill Leinster this weekend.
Yeah, like I mean, the grandmother killing is not something that maybe Munster have signed up for. You know, you can take that wherever you want. This is like there was an interesting reaction to your obvious campaign yesterday, because that's what it is. This sort of Leinster aren't favourites for this. Just wait until you see the team sheet and wait until you see the depth that Leinster do have. If you're coming at Neil with concerns about Leinster's fitness and all that, I mean, they're still going to be favourites. It's a bizarre campaign, to be honest. It's almost defeatist on your part, and there will be no satisfaction for you, and there will be no winning for you if you're right in the end, right in inverted commas, because you'll actually just been wrong, really. You'll have just, I guess, sowed seeds of doubt that may have actually resulted in Munster getting the job done.
They don't do Yeras in rugby, Owen. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Get with the picture.
No,
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. You're trying to Yera us all week here. On Friday, you're going to come out and you're going to be all in on Munster, but you're trying to build it up slowly. They don't do that in rugby.
No, they're confident. The back page of the Indo says that Joey Carberry's going to start this game. It's like, finally, these two teams are like fit for purpose to go against each other.
Yeah, like I'm making the point here that Ger has been yerring away Leinster, and like I agree with you. That's not part of rugby culture. Ger, take your GAA background and go back to where you came from with it. Is what I'm saying.
Right, brilliant stuff from Neil's Type 5 there today. More Leinster, Munster goodness coming your way. A reminder, OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're going to bring you the reaction to Ireland-Serbia, which is of course live and off the ball tonight. Gary Breen and Vinnie Perth are going to join us in tomorrow's show. We've got the OTB TV picks. We're going to hear from Dr. Noel McCaffrey as well. But right now, we're bringing you some of the brilliant chat between Danny Murphy and Joe on our Paddy Park football special yesterday afternoon. Enjoy.
I know you went to Charlton, and I know you especially enjoyed your first year at Charlton, but do you remember watching the 05 Champions League final, you know, behind the couch, hands on your head, or was it okay, or do you even remember?
Do you know what? I do remember. I watched it on my own.
See, that doesn't sound good for a start.
I like watching football on my own anyway.
Okay, the tactics again.
Just to focus. I can't be doing people chatting to me while I'm watching it, you know.
Yeah.
But I remember Franny Jeffers, who was at Charlton at the time, he was Everton money. He was texting me through the first half, and I was gutted for the lads, you know, who were friends of mine, because I knew how desperately they wanted it. And then I suppose at the end of the game, when the celebration started, it was the first moment in the evening where I was struggling a bit with it, thinking I should be there. So it was a really bittersweet evening. You know, I spoke to the boys after to congratulate them. And, you know, I could feel their joy. It was, when you care for people, you can only be happy for them, because, you know, I spent a lot of time with Cara and Stevie. But there was a part of me that was sick. There was a part of me that was gutted that I wasn't part of it. But then you have to just quickly get to a point where you go, took a while, by the way, where you go, you know what? Someone said to me, you're going to have 6 years, whatever it was, at Liverpool, and win trophies play it with the shirt on of the team you love, play in front of the Kop, you know, score at Old Trafford, Goodison, whatever. I mean, come on. I mean, I'd have snatched your hand off. Be thankful what you've had, not what you didn't have, you know?
No, it's true. You're in the 0.0001% of everybody who's had that dream, you know? We're not crying tears for you either, but it's tough. It is tough. You mentioned Carragher.
It was a tough watch.
Yeah, I can imagine. You mentioned Carragher and Gerard there and the closeness. What friendships have survived moving on and survived retirement? Because we often hear, you know, footballers really tight and then it just drifts. So which friendships have survived for you over the last decade or so?
Well, I'm still in touch with them.
Right.
As the years have gone on, some years would be, you know, you'd see or speak to them more than others, depending on circumstances and busyness and family and kids being born and God knows what. But yeah, Cara and Steve, Cara, you know, we're in the same field. You know, we message, we speak. Stevie, obviously, a manager. I saw Stevie recently, actually, at Gerard Houllier's memorial. It was great to see him, and Gary Mack. So, yeah, me and Stevie swap messages. I don't get to meet up with them very often. Obviously, it's been impossible anyway with COVID, as you know. But, yeah, so Stevie and Cara I've maintained a friendship with. Other than that, you get this world now where you stay in touch on social media. You know, John Arisa, Sammy Hippie, Jersey Dudek, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Jersey. People, you know, the social media keeps you active with others and seeing how their lives are, but probably those two being the main two, because of Michael I still see on the media circuit. Michael I still, you know, if I need a favour, I'll give him a shout. I need something signed or a tip on a horse race, I might give him a text. But, you know, it's hard. Life, you move on, and location-wise. But, yeah, I was the first to, you know, one of the first to send Stevie a message, congratulate him on the winning the league, of course. And Cara, as I say, I'm in touch with a lot because we share views on what we see on the on the media circuit. Normally the same views, actually, to be fair to me and Cara.
Good. It's funny, we never know what's going on in a footballer's life. So I know at Charlton you enjoyed that year, maybe second year less so, and end up at Spurs. And the sense I'd always had, I'm not even sure where you pick it up, a headline here or there, was that there'd been a falling out with Martin Yall, or that, you know, they just hadn't worked out in those kind of 19 months. And then just in advance of talking to you today, had a deeper look, and it's something completely unconnected with anything a fan might see. And it was the very sad passing of your father prematurely, and that understandably knocked you for six. That happened right in the kind of heart of your time at Spurs. And you know, again, looking in on the outside, I had no memory of that. I just thought God didn't really work out for him at Spurs for whatever reason.
I didn't talk about it, that's why. Maybe I should have. So I went in the January, which is never a good thing to do. Sure. And Tottenham were doing really well. So I was bought really for the next season, because there was a huge confidence around the club that we were going to be in the Champions League and the squad was going to have to be better. The start of that second season, my daughter was born, which was a big thing as well. So that preoccupied me a little bit, as you can imagine. But then I got a little run in the team and started showing some form. And then, my old man got ill really quickly and out of the blue. And of course, I spent time with him up until he passed, which was a massive chunk of time in terms of the football world. It was probably, I don't know, say it was a month. You're not training, and emotionally, of course, it takes its toll. What you don't realise at the time, once he'd passed and I was desperately wanting to get back and occupy myself, is that I didn't realise the effect it had on me, not just physically, but emotionally as well. It was only years later I could look back and try and judge that. And of course, blaming somebody was easier in terms of falling out with Martin and, why aren't you playing me? Why are you playing him? Et cetera, et cetera. And you don't want to take responsibility. But I suppose in life, when wisdom comes to you as you get a bit older, you can look back and see what really went on. Yeah, I was in a ridiculously difficult position to try and play my best football. And probably the one thing I didn't do, which I chose not to, and I can't really think why. I suppose I didn't want everybody giving me sympathy. I chose not to speak. So then when I decided to leave Spurs because I'd kind of fallen back in the pecking order and not playing, because I love playing, a lot of clubs were saying to me and my agent, well, what's happened? And then I had to kind of explain the situation because, as you well rightly said, it looked like I'd just fallen off the cliff. And then I got the move to Fulham, and I have to say that the hierarchy at Tottenham were brilliant in making that. And Martin and I didn't fall out. We shook hands at the end. We had our words during my time there, but as I said, I have to take some responsibility for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a difficult time, and probably the one biggest regret in my career is not showing the Tottenham fans, other than probably 4 or 5 games, what I could really do.
And it would have suited you down to the ground, that club and that style of football as well. I mean, it looked like a good match.
Indeed, good players. They had a lot going on. Carrick was there, Edgar was there, Lennon, Keano. I give Keano, mate. Berber was there. Keano was brilliant with me as well because, he'd lost his dad years earlier, so he understood. Became a really good friend of mine, Robbie. It was a nice friendship to have in that moment. Great support, but the club was phenomenal. It was brilliant place to work, and I deeply regret not showing the fans that I had more to offer.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they understand, and it's interesting. So, this macho environment as well, and you mentioned Robbie Keane's father had passed far too soon as well. So, when you say support, I mean, is that like a come on, let's go out and have a few beers and just get off our heads?
But also talking about it.
Proper. Let's have a heart to heart. Let's try and how you feel and tell me your emotions.
No, even in a jokey way, even in a matter of fact way. Like bringing up the subject of someone's death is very difficult. I mean, it's obviously we've all got different stories, but what the normal thing was when I went back was a lot of lads just to be a little bit sensitive and Danny, you're right, yeah, all right, and then their head goes down and. Whereas Keano would just openly talk about it. He would, and then I might not play for a couple of weeks, or I'm on the bench, and he'd say to me, "Come on, you come into mine. We're going out. We're gonna have some food and have a few beers. We'll have a night out." Even made me wear his gear one night. That's a different story.
That's a bit much.
But, well, no, do you know what? I'll tell you that quickly. We went out one night because he was trying to cheer me up. To be fair, well, I hadn't played. I got over me old man and that. And we went out, and I had no stuff. And he said, well, we're similar size. You can wear my gear. And the short version is that we were in a bar and we got talking to a few girls. And I'll never forget that one of them decided to lay into my gear. And Keano was not best pleased, let me tell you. But the irony was I was finding it hilarious, even though she was having to go at what I was wearing. So, yeah, that was Keano all over. He was great fun, great support.
Yeah, I can imagine that was important. This era we're talking about, by the way, I mean, geez, to play through it must have been fun. It was even great just to be able to watch it. You're talking that late 90s into the 99 United treble winning era. You've got the Arsenal Invincibles, as you mentioned. You're then into Mourinho and Chelsea, and then United come back with Ronaldo and Rooney and Tevez, and I think Fergie retires the same year as you, and Man City are on the scene. That's a lot of proper teams you're against, a lot of brilliant opponents. And I hate the, best opponent question, so I don't want to put it like that. But who are the ones you really remember thinking, when I'm at my best and he's at his best, this is great fun, us two going head to head?
it's difficult at times because a lot of the times you can admire players and you're on the same pitch and their brilliance is obvious, but you're not up against them.
Yes.
So there's wonderful talent that you come up against, and there's so many players that you could reel off, the best midfielders with this country's seen. But I always struggled a bit with Scholes. I try and go after him and get after him and let him know you're there and he'd play around you. Sit off him and he'd hurt you with his passing and spray it and play past you. And Carrick was another one I didn't like playing against. Very intelligent, always knew when to come after you, when to drop off, read your passes, always be thinking one step ahead.
Right.
And probably those two come to mind because they were playing for Man U, who were so successful. I didn't play too many times in central midfield up against the likes. A couple of times I did Vieira, but it wasn't the same. I never felt like he could hurt you as much. Scholes was the one who you'd come off the pit thinking he's just ran the whole show, he's ran the game. Of course, Stevie was a difficult opponent, but I always felt more comfortable playing against Stevie than I did some of the other players I mentioned, even though I think Stevie's the best midfielder the Premier League's ever seen. Because I knew him, it didn't feel as difficult. It felt like I knew what he was going to do, and I felt like more comfortable against Stevie. So Scholes was probably the one. The one player I'd say that in my later years, playing for Fulham in a holding role, the one player who probably, strangely this one might sound, Tim Cahill. He was absolutely brilliantly disciplined at stopping me playing.
Right.
And in a very clever way. He'd mark you the wrong side. He'd come at you late. He'd try different ways of stopping you playing and getting on the ball. And then, of course, when you think you've got him, when he's playing in that 10 role, he'd be off your shoulder and he'd be on the back post scoring.
Yeah.
He was probably, in my later years, the one player I used to think, oh, no, not today. Can't be doing with Tim today.
See, that's a brilliant answer, because you could have said, the usual suspects, but Carrick and his thinking and being one step ahead, I think you have to be on a pitch with someone to fully sense that, and Cahill would have never jumped to my mind either. That intelligence is almost what you respect as much as anything out there.
Correct. And Carrick was really, really good at that. When I'm on the ball, he would even be looking at, it's like even like a wry smile, as if to say, I know what you're thinking. Don't play it there because I'll have it. And then you end up thinking to yourself, is he thinking that or is he not? And hopefully maybe some respect the other way, he was, the same thing. But
yeah,
I used to think he knows what I'm thinking here, so I'll second guess what I'm going to do. And more often than not, he'd end up be intercepting balls that you never thought he'd know were going to happen. So Carrick was a really special player. United still haven't replaced him.
That must be one of the real joys of playing at that level. Everybody's technically proficient, and it's I can almost sense you on the pitch scanning who are the brains out here, the Carricks, the Cahills, those kind of guys. Who did you click with in terms of a telepathic relationship as a teammate? Who was that one that you were like, I know what he's going to do, he knows what I'm going to do, this is just heaven?
I had a real purple patch with Bentley at Charlton. Really purple patch. I was playing in a number 10 role, and he was playing high up, and I just knew where he was going to run the whole time.
Did you talk about it off the pitch? Didn't need to?
Not really. No, because he was very good. Bentley knew what he couldn't do. He didn't come and try and look good. He wouldn't come and show and play round corners and bounce it off him. As soon as I got the ball, he's spinning and he's running and he's making good runs. I knew his runs. I knew where to put the ball. So we had a really purple patch together. Of course, Michael was easy to play with, like Fowler and even Keano. Keano was a joy to play with. His movement was phenomenal, Keano. But I didn't play enough with him to have that great connection. So Bentley, I mean, Andy Johnson at Fulham, we had a good little relationship going on when he was fit. Very similar to Bentley, play off the shoulders and make good passes, bad passes look good.
Roy Hodgson is 73 years of age. He's managed 1,000 professional matches, still in the Premier League, not just managing any old team, he's still in the Premier League, which is nuts. This is the great Indian summer of your career, isn't it? This really kind of, I don't know, cements a certain quality that, people, because not that Charlton was beneath you, but you were a brilliant player at Liverpool, and you were unlucky with England. That was a golden generation, and your metatarsal did its thing in 2002, and you were clearly like best player at Charlton in many ways, and then Spurs didn't work out for reasons we've discussed. And I kind of think if it had drifted away there, that might have been unfulfilled. And yet those 5 years at Fulham, I felt almost reinstated. For in case there were any doubts, this guy was a quality player. I suspect important to you in that way too.
Yeah, it's a great point you make. I had to reinvent myself a little bit and show people that, you know what, remind people. I wasn't thinking that when I was trying to get back to playing well and you know, making an impact. But I certainly had a hunger in me still then, which probably came from the things you said. The first season was really difficult. We stayed up last day when I got the goal at Portsmouth, and then Lawrie Sanchez wasn't on the same page as me in terms of how we wanted to play. Of course not. But when Roy came in, he made some really astute signings: Schwartz, Andy Johnson, Bobby Zamora, Ger, people like Damien Duff. And the way he played was very similar to Julian. We didn't quite have the Liverpool quality, but well organised, good professionals, players who want to do the right things, working together, training well. It fit. It was a perfect fit for what I needed at the time. He gave me the armband. I felt fit and comfortable, and everything was fine at home. I was starting to influence games and dictate games in a midfield role, a central midfield role, where I had to curb my enthusiasm to go and try and score goals and make things happen so much and just leave that to others. That was the biggest challenge for me. In that I'd always been somebody who could make goals and score goals. I still made chances in that role at Fulham, but I was not scoring as much. You know, I wasn't. My role changed, and I had to really fight hard to change my game. And then when I got comfortable in that role, I started realising that I could impact others with my organisation, encouragement, whatever it was, and it just became a real enjoyable place to play football.
Yeah,
it was a great round in terms of it was always full. There wasn't a high expectancy. There was a team that believed in what the manager wanted. There was good experience. There was a really nice atmosphere to play your football, and we thrived. We really did.
It sounds good. All those things are like everything you say that Hodgson puts in place. On paper, they make perfect sense, and you would think, well, everyone should go and do that. And clearly, it's so much more difficult than it would seem. We had Stephen Kelly on not so long ago. Obviously, you know, get the Irish guys on quite a bit, and the Europa.
Well, I'm nearly Irish. My dad was born in Cork.
Is that right?
Yeah, he came over here when he was a baby.
Would you not have come over? Not have come over and won 100 Ireland caps for us? No.
Do you know what? When I was made aware that I could, I was already disqualified being able to do so, because back then I'd played for England under 18s or 20s in a tournament, World Youth Cup, I think. So that disqualified me from even having the choice.
Right. So Stephen Kelly was on. He was talking. It was the anniversary last year of the Europa League final run, all the way through to Atletico. And look, there's a lot of great. The Juventus game looms large, and there's you beat Hamburg, German champions, and at that Atletico team, obviously, all those players went on to become household names in a massive way. And yet Stephen Kelly was adamant. He said, "Forget about just that season." He said, "I think the best team I've ever played against was Shakhtar. That you just have no idea. I've no memory of this game." But I heard you say, I think you were talking to Jimmy Bullard. I listened to a podcast you'd done a while back, which was great. He's mad as a box of frogs in a wonderful way, isn't he? But you were saying something similar. I think Fernandinho and Douglas Costa and Willian, and it was just bum, 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 and chasing shadows for a lot of it.
If you ever want to watch a game of football where you see how important a coach is and what they do on a training pitch, is Fulham at home to Shakhtar Donetsk.
Okay.
So we score early on and late on. Score in the first minute, and Bobby scored a wonder goal late on, and we beat them 2-1. But the majority of the game was them playing wonderful football against a super well-drilled, organised, good communicators, senior players knowing our jobs. They play through and around, and unbelievable technical football. And we stay patient. We stay with the job in hand. We stay with the orders from the manager. We stay close. We stay compact. We don't get angry. We don't get frustrated. We don't get worried about the crowd moaning and groaning that we can't get the ball, don't come out of position. We stay disciplined. It's a phenomenal example of what a well-coached football team can achieve against a technically superior football team on the same pitch.
Really interesting. God, there's a gazillion things I wanted to ask you. I won't get to them all. I'm curious on England, and you were around the time of that golden generation, you know, and all the hype. Were you sitting there with your, understanding of, I think at Crewe you played in a midfield 3, so you understood the different ways football could be played from a young age. Did you look at this rigid 4-4-2 and look at Sven and say, this is not going to cut it? This is not going to cut it. If Lampard and Gerrard have been outplayed, then there's something wrong here tactically, or what were your thoughts around that time?
There was always conversations, yeah. Some of the lads saying maybe we should try and tweak it, or why doesn't he play him there and him there? There were conversations, but ultimately, I think the quality they had in the team, they still believed they could win playing that way.
Okay.
And there was a belief that if you play Michael, he had to play with somebody. Now, Michael's talent, that's not right. Michael would have been fine on his own. Yes, Heskey helped him. But if you're talking about playing Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard in a 3 and playing Beckham wide right, maybe Joe Cole wide left, or Kieran Dyer, whoever it was, you change the whole dynamic of the team, and the supply would have come to Michael through other areas. I think it was because Sven thought Michael needed a meal, and he didn't really want to play Beckham in a different position to what he did at Man United, and because he was so influential. But ultimately, yeah, we did think that. I did think that. But in the moment, you only think it per each game comes along, and we could have done better in that game, or maybe if we'd have played that way. I think only now looking back, and the way football's evolved, that conversation's become more prevalent.
A final point then on Crewe, and you said, if anyone's just joining us, talking to Danny Murphy here, where he came through at Crewe and made his senior debut at 16. In so many ways, they were ahead of their time, modelled on Ajax, and you were playing in different positions and time with the ball, and clearly did so many things right. And I know you have a huge amount of time for Dario Gradi and the impact he had in your career. Obviously, it's been just desperately sad more than anything over the last couple of years to see the players coming forward and talking about the abuse they suffered. I know on Wednesday, an independent review, for instance, of Gradi, who was Crewe's manager from 83 to 07, they said he should have done more to investigate concerns about Barry Bonnell. But they did stress he wasn't involved in a cover-up. So we should stress that point as well. It's such a mess. I mean, like it or not, Gradi's now associated with it in the public eye, and I'm sure that's a source of sadness to you. And it's just horrific. I know you said a couple of years ago when it all started coming out into the public, you weren't shocked. You'd obviously heard whispers or rumour of some sort, Danny.
Well, we were interviewed in the 90s by the police, when it first came out, while I was at Crewe.
Right, okay.
After he'd left, there was some rumours about, certain things. But when you're a young child, I went to Crewe when I was about 12, 13. So when he left, I was probably 14, 15. You hear the odd thing, but there was... You're so focused on your own world and your own bubble that you're not capable of taking any action or investigating. That's not your job to. But yeah, there was rumours, and then of course a bit later on when it got exposed in the 90s, we were interviewed and the things started coming out. But the thing to say for me is really simple, and I spoke about this in my column on Sunday. For a lot of people, a lot of young lads, and this doesn't hide from the fact and the problems that were at Crewe, and the way they've dealt with it's not been very good. I must repeat that.
Yeah.
But for me and lots of others, the environment was very safe and enjoyable and very beneficial. Now, that's the way it should be for all kids. And any wrongdoing or any cover-ups or any things that can be learned or punished should be. I'm all for that. It's a situation that's horrendous for the club. It's horrendous for the people involved. But as you said, Dario was not an abuser. He's apologised for not doing. He says he wasn't aware, and he could have. I don't think that man, knowing him like I do, would have let children be abused or hurt if he thought that's what was happening. I can't believe that. From the man I spent years with, he's a very caring man. I don't believe for 1 second that that's the case. Now, could he have done things differently and investigated things more? Yes, probably. Do I think that haunts him? Probably. And he doesn't sleep at night thinking about what he could have and should have done? Probably. But all I can talk about is my own experience. It doesn't mean that some of the lads and friends of mine, by the way, some of the lads involved are friends of mine.
Right.
I feel their pain, and it doesn't help them that I had a good experience.
Yes.
It doesn't help them that other kids didn't have to suffer this. That doesn't help them, and I understand the need for justice. But I have to say from my experience that the Crew Academy and the Crew journey that I went on was very beneficial and very enjoyable for me.
I guess you have to count yourself extremely lucky, don't you? I think your time in Benell's coincided for maybe a year or so, and he was around.
I stayed at his house.
Wow.
I stayed at his house one evening. One evening I stayed at his house. It was a very normal evening. I didn't suspect a thing.
Right.
I didn't have a bad experience. I know what a monster he is, by the way.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, do you think my parents would let me stay there if they thought he was a monster? Now, there is always an argument of why a coach is letting players stay at their houses, etc., etc. I mean, we're talking a long time ago where life was very different. It wouldn't happen now. But yeah, I feel lucky that I wasn't involved in his web of abhorrent behaviour and abuse. I mean, I was lucky. Yeah, I do feel lucky.
God, staying in the South, that's a chilling thought now, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's my main concern is for the lads. The bravery they've showed in coming out is phenomenal. I think it's been a brilliant thing that the lads did to come out and then help others come out and talk about these problems and hopefully get to a point where we are not worried about our children going to play football.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new